Story 1. At exactly 2:17 a.m., every radio in Briar Hollow began to speak. Not music, not emergency alerts, not static. A voice. Low, calm, male, mechanical yet strangely human. 3 days remain, it said. Then silence. Across the quiet Appalachian town, radios crackled back to static. Car dashboards flickered. Kitchen radios, forgotten in dark homes, hummed quietly before dying again. Even police scanners froze mid-transmission. Most residents rolled over in their sleep, never hearing it. But for a few people in Briar Hollow, the message changed everything. Journalist Elena Ward was one of them. She sat upright in bed, heart pounding, staring at the antique radio resting on her nightstand. It had belonged to her grandfather, a former radio operator during the Cold War. She kept it mostly for sentimental reasons, rarely turning it on. But tonight, it had turned on by itself. 3 days remain. The words echoed in her mind as she grabbed her phone and checked the time. 2:17 a.m. Elena swung her legs off the bed, the wooden floor cold beneath her feet. Her instincts told her something wasn't right. She'd spent 10 years chasing stories across small towns and forgotten cities, uncovering corruption and criminal networks most reporters ignored. This felt different. This felt deliberate. She leaned closer to the radio, adjusting the dial. Nothing but static responded. No signal. No interference pattern she recognized. Her phone buzzed suddenly. It was a message from her editor, Mark. "You awake? Weird reports coming in. Radios all over town broadcasting the same thing. Police scanner chatter is going nuts." Elena's pulse quickened. She typed back instantly. "I heard it too. I'm heading out." Briar Hollow was a town that thrived on routine. Coal mines once supported its economy. Now tourism and seasonal hiking trails kept it barely alive. The town rested in a valley surrounded by thick pine forests and abandoned mining tunnels that stretched for miles beneath the mountains. Strange things sometimes happened in Briar Hollow, but nothing like this. Elena grabbed her coat, camera bag, and digital recorder before stepping outside into the freezing night air. Snow flurries drifted lazily beneath flickering streetlights. The town looked peaceful. Too peaceful. Her car radio was already on when she opened the door. Static. She froze. She hadn't left it on. Slowly, she reached inside and shut it off. Her reflection stared back from the dark windshield, eyes wide with unease. The police station was buzzing when she arrived. Sheriff Daniel Crow stood near the front desk, his weathered face tight with tension as deputies spoke rapidly around him. Radios crackled. Dispatchers scrambled to document incoming calls. Crow noticed Elena immediately. "You here for a story or to cause problems, Ward?" Elena gave him a tired half-smile. "Depends on how weird this gets." Crow sighed, rubbing his temples. "You heard it?" "Yeah. Whole town did. Hundreds of reports. Any idea where it came from?" Crow shook his head. "We checked emergency broadcast systems. Nothing triggered. No official transmission logged." "That's impossible," Elena said. "Welcome to my night." A young deputy approached, holding a tablet. "Sheriff, you need to see this." Crow glanced at the screen, his expression darkening instantly. "What is it?" Elena asked. He hesitated, then turned the tablet toward her. It showed a digital map of Briar Hollow. Red dots marked locations across town, homes, businesses, vehicles, every confirmed radio broadcast report. There were hundreds. But what froze Elena's blood wasn't the number. It was the pattern. The red dots formed a perfect circle around the center of town. "What's in the middle?" she whispered. Crow didn't answer immediately, because they both already knew. The center of Briar Hollow was home to one thing: the abandoned WXL radio station, closed for nearly 20 years. Station burned down in 2007, Crow said quietly as they drove toward the mountain road leading to the ruins. Elena scribbled notes. "Arson? Officially electrical failure. Unofficially," he shrugged. 5 employees died in that fire. "Any suspects?" "No arrests." Case went cold fast. Snow crunched beneath the tires as they climbed the winding road toward the forested ridge where WXL once stood. Elena stared out the window. The deeper they drove, the darker the forest became. Pine branches leaned over the road like skeletal fingers. "You think someone hijacked the old signal tower?" she asked. Crow shook his head. Tower collapsed in the fire. Then how? The sheriff slammed the brakes suddenly. Headlights illuminated something standing in the middle of the road. A portable radio. Old-fashioned. Battery-powered. Sitting upright in fresh snow. Elena felt her breath catch. That wasn't there last week, Crow muttered. They stepped out carefully, boots crunching against ice. The radio hissed softly, static bleeding into the silent forest. Elena knelt beside it, her camera clicking rapidly. Could be planted, she said. Could be bait, Crow replied. As if triggered by their presence, the radio crackled louder. Then the voice returned. Clearer this time. 2 days remain. Elena jerked backward, nearly falling into the snow. Crow grabbed the radio, inspecting it frantically. No power source, he said, turning it over. No batteries. The voice continued calmly. Briar Hollow must remember. Then it went silent again. They brought the radio back to the station for forensic analysis. Within hours, word spread across town. Social media exploded. Residents began sharing stories. Every broadcast had occurred at exactly 2:17 a.m. Every radio affected had been within town limits, and no one could trace the signal origin. Elena sat in the sheriff's office, reviewing archived news footage about the WXL fire. 5 deaths, she said quietly. And after that, the station shut down permanently? Crow nodded. Owner vanished after the investigation. Vanished. Packed up, left town, never contacted anyone again. Elena leaned forward. What was the station known for? Crow hesitated. Late-night call-in shows. Paranormal stuff. Urban legends. Missing persons discussions. Elena's stomach twisted slightly. Sounds like a magnet for attention. Or secrets, Crow added. At 1:59 a.m. the next night, Briar Hollow held its breath. Police officers patrolled neighborhoods. Technicians monitored frequencies. Residents gathered around televisions and phones, waiting. Elena sat inside the sheriff's communications room, headphones resting around her neck, digital equipment ready. 2:17 a.m. arrived. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then every electronic monitor inside the station flickered simultaneously. Static exploded across speakers, and the voice returned. Yesterday you heard the warning, it said calmly. Today you hear the truth. Elena's hands trembled as she activated recording equipment. You buried them, the voice continued. You silenced the station. You thought the fire erased everything. Crow whispered, What the hell? The voice lowered slightly. But the broadcast never stopped. Then came something far worse. A list of names. 5 names. The 5 employees who died in the WXL fire. But the voice didn't stop there. It spoke a 6th name. One not listed in any official report. Elena felt ice crawl down her spine. Crow stared at her slowly. Ward, he said hoarsely. That 6th name. Elena nodded slowly. It belongs to a missing teenager who disappeared the same night as the fire. Across Briar Hollow, panic began to spread. Residents realized the broadcasts weren't random. They were exposing something buried inside the town's history. And tomorrow, the countdown would reach 0. Elena stood outside the station just before dawn, watching snow fall gently across empty streets. Her recorder played the chilling broadcast again through her headphones. 3 days remain. 2 days remain. Now only 1 remained. Behind her, Sheriff Crow stepped onto the sidewalk. You still think this is just a story? He asked quietly. Elena removed her headphones, staring toward the distant mountain ridge where the burned skeleton of WXL still stood hidden inside the forest. No, she said. I think Briar Hollow is about to learn why that station really burned down. Somewhere deep in the mountains, inside the charred ruins of WXL, a red recording light blinked on by itself, and an unseen hand adjusted a microphone that hadn't been touched in 20 years. By sunrise, Briar Hollow no longer felt like the quiet mountain town Elena Ward had spent her career documenting. The snow-covered streets buzzed with rumors, panic, and fear. Local businesses opened late. Parents kept children home from school. And every radio, whether plugged in or stored in dusty basements, was now being watched like it might come alive at any moment. Inside the sheriff's office, the atmosphere was worse. Sheriff Daniel Crow stood over a whiteboard filled with scribbled timelines, photos of the WXL fire, and the 6 names broadcast the night before. Officers moved quickly between desks, answering frantic calls from residents reporting strange electrical interference and radios turning on and off without explanation. Elena sat at a cluttered table, reviewing old newspaper archives on her laptop. Her eyes scanned headline after headline from 2007. Local radio station destroyed in tragic fire. 5 dead in late-night blaze. Investigation rules electrical failure. Each article repeated the same details. Same official statements. Same lack of follow-up questions. It felt rehearsed. Notice anything? Crow asked, leaning against the desk beside her. Elaborate cover story, she replied. Crow raised an eyebrow. Elena, 5 people died. That's not unusual for local media to report respectfully. She turned the screen toward him. Look closer, she said. Crow leaned in. Every article quotes the same fire inspector. Same phrasing. Same timeline. And none mention the missing teenager whose name was broadcast last night. Crow frowned. What was the name again? Elena swallowed. Ethan Rowe. Crow stiffened slightly. You recognize it? She asked. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. Rowe family still lives here, he said. Moved out to the north side of town after the disappearance. They never believed he ran away. Elena closed her laptop quietly. I think we need to talk to them. The row house sat alone at the end of a long gravel road surrounded by pine trees heavy with snow. The 2-story home looked older than most in Briar Hollow, its wooden siding faded and peeling. As Elena and Crow approached the front porch, Elena noticed wind chimes hanging near the door. Each chime was shaped like a small metal radio antenna. Crow knocked twice. The door opened slowly. Margaret Rowe stood in the doorway, her silver hair pulled tightly into a bun, her face pale and lined with exhaustion that seemed older than her years. Sheriff, she said quietly, I figured you'd come eventually. Her eyes shifted toward Elena. And you must be the reporter stirring up old ghosts. Elena nodded respectfully. Mrs. Rowe, we're sorry to disturb you. Margaret stepped aside silently, allowing them inside. The living room smelled faintly of dust and cedar wood. Photographs covered the walls, family portraits, graduation pictures, holiday gatherings frozen in time. Elena's eyes immediately locked onto one frame sitting on the fireplace mantel. A teenage boy smiled at the camera, freckles dusting his cheeks, headphones resting around his neck. Ethan Rowe. He loved radio, Margaret said from behind them, her voice steady but fragile. Wanted to be a broadcaster someday. Crow stepped closer to the photograph. Mrs. Rowe, we're reopening questions about the night Ethan disappeared. Margaret let out a slow, bitter laugh. You mean the night WXL burned down? Elena's heart skipped. You believe they're connected? She asked. Margaret turned, her eyes sharp. I know they are. Margaret led them into a small study, filled with filing cabinets and cardboard boxes stacked carefully along the walls. I spent years collecting this, she said, opening one of the cabinets. Inside were neatly organized folders labeled with dates, names, and WXL employee records. Elena, Crow whispered, stunned. She's been running her own investigation. Margaret pulled out a folder and handed it to them. Ethan didn't run away, she said. He was working at WXL that night. Crow froze. That's impossible, he said. Station employment records list only 5 staff members. Margaret handed him a photograph. It showed Ethan standing inside a radio studio, wearing oversized headphones, smiling nervously. Behind him, a microphone displayed the WXL logo. He was an unpaid intern, Margaret said quietly. They never reported him because they weren't legally allowed to hire minors overnight. Elena felt a chill spread through her chest. They hid his presence to avoid legal consequences, she whispered. Margaret nodded slowly. After the fire, they told me Ethan wasn't there. Said he must have run away. But I knew the truth. Did you ever find proof he died in the fire? Crow asked gently. Margaret's hands trembled slightly. No body was ever recovered, she said. Silence filled the room. Elena glanced at Crow, who looked visibly shaken. If Ethan died in that fire, Elena said carefully, why would someone broadcast his name now? Margaret stared toward the window where snow fell silently outside. Because something else happened that night, she said. And someone doesn't want it forgotten. Back at the sheriff's station, Elena and Crow reviewed Margaret's files. They discovered disturbing inconsistencies in WEXL's operations. Late-night broadcasts had been hosted by a popular show called Voices After Midnight. The program encouraged callers to share secrets anonymously. Missing persons, confessions, local rumors. Ratings skyrocketed during its final year. "Elena," Crow said, scrolling through archived transcripts, "listen to this." He played an old recording recovered from Margaret's collection. A distorted voice spoke through static. "I know what happened in the tunnels," the caller whispered. "They buried them deeper than anyone knows." The host laughed nervously and cut the line. Elena's pulse raced. "What tunnels?" she asked. Crow stared at a topographical map pinned to the wall. The abandoned coal mines beneath Briar Hollow. Later that afternoon, the forensic team finally finished analyzing the portable radio found in the mountain road. Deputy Harris approached Elena and Crow with the results. "You're not going to believe this," Harris said. Crow sighed. "Try me." The radio is at least 30 years old. Completely analog. No digital components. No transmitter hardware. "Then how is it broadcasting?" Elena asked. Harris hesitated. "It isn't, at least not in any way we understand." Crow crossed his arms. "Meaning?" "The signal seems to be piggybacking onto existing radio frequencies across town simultaneously." Elena blinked. "That's impossible." Harris nodded grimly. "Unless someone is using multiple synchronized transmitters, or a single powerful source buried somewhere underground." Crow and Elena exchanged a look. "Tunnels," they said simultaneously. That night, Elena returned to her apartment to organize her recordings. The town outside had grown eerily quiet. Even traffic felt slower, cautious, as if Briar Hollow was holding its breath. She placed her recorder on the desk and replayed the latest broadcast again. "You buried them." Her stomach twisted. Her phone buzzed suddenly. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello." Static filled the line. Then the same mechanical voice whispered softly. "You're getting closer," Elena warned. Her blood ran cold. "How do you know my name?" she demanded. "You listen better than most," the voice replied calmly. "Who are you?" A pause. "Tomorrow, you'll understand why WXL burned." The call ended instantly. Elena stared at her phone, heart hammering violently. She rushed to her window. Across the street, her car radio turned on by itself. Static poured from the speakers, slowly forming into faint whispers overlapping each other. She grabbed her coat and ran outside. By the time she reached the car, the whispers stopped. Only silence remained. But sitting on her windshield was something new. A cassette tape, labeled in faded handwriting. Voices After Midnight, final episode. Inside the sheriff's office, Crow was reviewing old fire department logs when Elena burst through the door, breathless, holding the cassette tape. "You need to hear this," she said. Crow stared at the tape, his face pale. "That episode was never archived," he whispered. "They said it was destroyed in the fire." Elena placed the tape recorder on the desk carefully. "Then someone wants us to hear it now." They pressed play. Static filled the room before clearing slowly. A radio host's voice emerged, nervous, strained. "This is WXL. Voices After Midnight, broadcasting live. Something is wrong tonight. If anyone can hear this, we need help." Elena and Crow leaned closer. Another voice interrupted. Panicked. "We found something in the tunnels, something we weren't supposed to find." A loud crash echoed through the recording. Screams followed. Then another voice whispered directly into the microphone. "Seal it. Burn the station. No one can know." The recording ended abruptly in distorted static. The room fell silent. Crow looked at Elena slowly. "That wasn't an accident," he said. "No," she replied, voice shaking. "It was a cover-up." Across Briar Hollow, radios began flickering again as midnight approached. Snow fell heavier now, blanketing streets in ghostly white silence. In the ruins of WXL Station, deep beneath the collapsed broadcasting tower, hidden electrical wires sparked to life. And inside the underground tunnels beneath the town, old microphones began recording once more. Snow fell heavier the next morning, covering Briar Hollow in a suffocating silence that felt unnatural. The town had grown restless overnight. Radios flickered randomly. Power surged in certain neighborhoods. And rumors spread faster than facts, twisting fear into something almost tangible. Inside the sheriff's station, Elena Ward stared at the cassette tapes sitting on the evidence table. The words from the final WXL broadcast echoed in her mind. Seal it. Burn the station. No one can know. Sheriff Daniel Crow stood beside a large map of Briar Hollow, tracing his finger along faded mining routes that stretched beneath the town like veins. The coal tunnels run under nearly half the valley, he said quietly. Most entrances collapsed decades ago, but some are still accessible. Elena crossed her arms. If WXL found something underground, and someone burned the station to cover it up. Crow nodded grimly. Then whatever they found might still be down there. Deputy Harris stepped forward, holding an old survey blueprint recovered from town archives. Sheriff, I found this from a 1994 geological study, Harris said. There's a maintenance access tunnel directly beneath the WXL building. It connects to the original mining grid. Elena felt her pulse quicken. So the station was literally built over the tunnels, she said. Exactly, Harris replied. And that maintenance shaft was sealed after the fire. Crow grabbed his coat. Get the search team ready, he said. We're going underground. The WXL ruins looked even more haunting during daylight. Charred beams jutted from the snow like blackened bones. The collapsed broadcasting tower leaned at an unnatural angle, half buried beneath frozen debris. Pine trees surrounding the structure stood silent, their branches heavy with snow. Elena stepped carefully through the remains, her boots crunching against frost-covered ash. The air still carried a faint burnt smell, as if the fire had never truly died. Crow led them toward what remained of the station's basement entrance. Deputies cleared debris while the forensic team documented everything carefully. Within an hour, they uncovered a rusted steel hatch hidden beneath collapsed flooring. Deputy Harris brushed snow away from the handle. There it is, he said quietly. Crow glanced at Elena. Once we open this, there's no telling what we'll find. Elena adjusted her recorder, her hands steady despite the knot forming in her chest. Then let's stop guessing, she said. The hatch screamed loudly as deputies pried it open. A gust of stale, icy air rushed upward from the darkness below. It smelled of mold, rust, and something far worse, something organic that had long since decayed. A narrow metal ladder descended into blackness. Crow clicked on his flashlight. The beam disappeared quickly into the void. Stay close, he said. One by one, they climbed down. The tunnel floor was damp, uneven, and coated in thick dust that had not been disturbed in years. Rusted pipes lined the ceiling. Water dripped steadily somewhere in the distance, echoing through the underground maze like slow, rhythmic breathing. Elena scanned the walls with her flashlight. Look, she whispered. Symbols were carved into the concrete. Not random graffiti. Radio frequencies. Transmission diagrams. Signal maps branching outward from WXL like roots. Crow studied them carefully. This wasn't done by miners, he said. No, Elena replied. This looks like technical mapping, like someone was testing broadcast range underground. They moved deeper into the tunnel. The air grew colder, the silence heavier. After nearly 20 minutes of walking, they reached a reinforced steel door partially welded shut. Burn marks blackened its edges. Crow examined the hinges. This was sealed intentionally, he said. Deputies cut through the rusted weld using portable tools. Sparks filled the narrow tunnel as metal groaned under pressure. Finally, the door swung open. The beam of Crow's flashlight revealed something that made Elena freeze instantly. Recording equipment, old analog transmitters, microphones mounted along the walls, dozens of reel-to-reel tape machines stacked in metal racks. The entire underground chamber had been converted into a hidden broadcast studio. Oh my God, Elena whispered. Crow stepped inside slowly, scanning the room. WXL wasn't just broadcasting from above ground, he said. They had a secondary transmission facility down here. Elena moved toward a desk covered in dusty paperwork. She flipped through logbooks labeled by date. These recordings go back nearly 30 years, she said. Crow examined one of the machines carefully. Why build a secret studio underground? He asked. Before Elena could answer, Deputy Harris called out from the far side of the chamber. Sheriff, you need to see this. Behind a row of recording equipment stood another corridor. At the end of it, iron bars, like a holding cell. Elena's stomach twisted as they approached. Inside the cell, Broken chains dangled from the wall. Rusted restraints lay scattered across the floor. Old mattresses, stained and torn, rested against the concrete. Crow's face darkened. "This wasn't storage," he said. "No," Elena whispered, horror spreading through her voice. "This was a prison." She knelt near the floor, brushing dust away from faded chalk markings etched into the concrete. Dates, names, tally marks counting days. Among them, she spotted one written shakily across the wall. Ethan. Elena felt tears sting her eyes. "He was here," she said quietly. Crow clenched his jaw, fury flashing across his expression. Suddenly, one of the reel-to-reel machines clicked loudly behind them. The tape began spinning on its own. Elena turned sharply, her heart slamming against her ribs. Static poured through the chamber speakers. Then a recorded voice emerged. Young, terrified. "They said we were helping the broadcast," the voice whispered. "They said people wanted to hear real confessions, real fear." Elena pressed closer to the machine, her breath shallow. "It's Ethan," she whispered. The recording continued. "They bring callers here, record them. Sometimes they don't leave. The tunnels go deeper than the maps. There are rooms down there. They say it's part of the show, but it's not a show anymore." The tape crackled violently. "They're arguing upstairs. Someone found the holding cells. They're talking about burning everything. I think they know I'm recording this." A loud bang echoed through the recording. Screams followed. Then silence. The tape stopped spinning. No one spoke for several seconds. Crow finally exhaled slowly. "They were kidnapping people," he said. "And broadcasting their confessions," Elena added. "Or forcing them." Elena turned slowly, staring into the dark tunnel extending beyond the cell corridor. "If Ethan mentioned deeper rooms." Crow nodded grimly. "Then we haven't reached the worst part yet." They advanced cautiously into the lower tunnels. The temperature dropped sharply. Frost coated the walls. Their flashlights barely penetrated the suffocating darkness ahead. Then they found it. A massive underground chamber reinforced with wooden mining beams. Electrical wiring stretched across the ceiling. More recording equipment lined the walls. But at the center of the chamber lay dozens of rusted metal cages. Empty. Mostly. Elena's chest tightened as she stepped closer. Some cages still held tattered clothing. Others contained scattered personal belongings, wallets, jewelry, watches, items clearly taken from victims. Crow moved slowly through the chamber, his face pale with rage. "How many people?" he whispered. Deputy Harris counted the cages silently. 37, he said. Elena's legs nearly gave out. Then the overhead speakers crackled. Static filled the cavernous chamber. The mechanical voice returned. "You have found the truth," it said calmly. Crow raised his flashlight toward the ceiling instinctively. "Who are you?" he shouted. The voice ignored him. The broadcast never ended. The confessions must continue. Elena's hands trembled as she activated her recorder. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. A pause followed. Then the voice answered softly, "Because Briar Hollow demanded entertainment." The speakers cut to silence again. Elena turned toward Crow slowly. "That voice," she whispered. "It isn't just exposing the past." "No," Crow said, scanning the chamber nervously. "It sounds like it's still operating." Behind them, deeper in the tunnel system, something metallic shifted in the darkness. Like a door closing. Or locking. Elena turned sharply toward the sound. "Sheriff!" Crow lifted his flashlight toward the deeper tunnel entrance, his hand slowly reaching for his weapon. "Everyone stay alert," he said quietly. From somewhere deep beneath Briar Hollow, a faint red recording light flickered on. The red recording light pulsed faintly at the far end of the tunnel, barely visible through layers of dust and shadow. It blinked steadily, like a heartbeat echoing through the underground chamber, filled with rusted cages and abandoned recording equipment. No one spoke. Sheriff Daniel Crow raised his flashlight slowly, the beam trembling slightly as it cut through the darkness. Deputy Harris adjusted his radio, but it responded only with crackling static. "We just lost communication with the surface," Harris said quietly. Elena Ward's chest tightened. "You mean interference?" Harris shook his head. "More like total signal blackout." Crow exhaled slowly. "Stay close. Nobody moves alone." The team stepped deeper into the tunnel. The air grew heavier as they advanced. Moisture dripped steadily from the ceiling, each drop echoing unnaturally loud in the suffocating silence. The tunnel narrowed slightly before opening into another reinforced passage lined with corroded electrical panels. Elena brushed her fingers across one of the panels, revealing faded labels scratched into the metal. Channel 1, Live Confessions. Channel 2, Archive Feeds. Channel 3, Listener Interaction. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't just a radio station, she whispered. It was a production system. Crow nodded grimly. A system built around human suffering. As they moved forward, Elena noticed something disturbing etched into the concrete walls. Names. Dozens of them. Some crossed out. Others circled in thick red paint that had faded into dark brown streaks over time. She stopped suddenly. "Sheriff, look at this." Crow stepped closer. Among the names, several were followed by dates, but others were followed by the word broadcasted. Elena felt cold spread through her entire body. They were labeling victims based on whether their confessions aired, she said. Crow clenched his fists. This wasn't entertainment. It was torture disguised as storytelling. The tunnel sloped downward, eventually leading them toward a sealed metal elevator shaft. The elevator itself hung crookedly between floors, frozen in place after decades of disuse. Its doors remained slightly open, revealing darkness inside. Deputy Harris shined his light downward. "It drops another 30 feet, he said. Crow examined the support cables carefully. "We're not using that," he said. Instead, they located a narrow maintenance staircase spiraling downward beside the shaft. The steps creaked beneath their boots as they descended deeper beneath Briar Hollow than any official mining map recorded. The temperature dropped sharply. Their breath formed pale clouds in front of their faces. At the bottom of the staircase, they entered a corridor far different from the abandoned upper tunnels. This one showed signs of recent use. Fresh footprints marked the dust-covered floor. Electrical wiring had been repaired using modern insulation, and dim emergency lights flickered faintly along the walls. Elena swallowed hard. "Someone's still maintaining this place," she whispered. Crow nodded. And recently, they reached another chamber, far smaller but more technologically advanced than anything above. Computer monitors sat on steel desks, their screens glowing faintly with static interference. Modern recording equipment had been wired directly into older analog transmitters, creating a disturbing fusion of old and new technology. Elena approached one of the monitors cautiously. The screen suddenly flickered, then displayed a live waveform pattern. "Audio input. Active." Crow stepped beside her. "That means someone is broadcasting right now," he said. Before Elena could respond, the speakers inside the chamber crackled loudly. Then the mechanical voice returned. "You have traveled farther than the others," it said calmly. Crow stepped forward. "Show yourself," he demanded. A low, distorted chuckle echoed through the speakers. "The story must continue, Sheriff Crow." Elena's pulse slammed violently against her ribs. "You know who we are," she said. "Of course," the voice replied. "You are the audience that refuses to listen." Suddenly, one of the monitors shifted from static to live camera footage. The image showed a narrow underground corridor, somewhere deeper inside the tunnel system. At the center of the frame stood a steel door marked with bold red letters. "Studio B." Elena leaned closer. "Is that where you are?" she asked. The voice paused, then replied quietly, "That is where the final broadcast begins." The camera feed flickered, revealing something else. Movement. A figure slumped against the far wall of the corridor. Crow leaned closer to the screen. "Zoom in," he said instinctively. Deputy Harris adjusted the monitor controls. The image sharpened slightly. Elena felt her breath catch. The figure was a woman. Her hands were bound. Her head hung forward. Long dark hair obscured her face. "She's alive," Elena whispered. The woman shifted weakly, confirming it. Crow's expression hardened instantly. "Where is Studio B?" he demanded. The mechanical voice answered calmly. "Follow the signal. But understand, every story needs its ending." The speakers cut to silence again. Crow turned toward his team immediately. "We move now," he said firmly. They followed a network of cables running along the corridor floor, tracing them deeper into the tunnel maze. The cables pulsed faintly with electricity, guiding them like veins leading toward a beating heart hidden underground. The tunnels grew more complex. More modern, more maintained. Elena noticed ventilation fans humming quietly overhead. Motion sensors flickered occasionally as they passed, triggering dim hallway lights one at a time. Someone had been living and working down here for years, maybe decades. Finally, they reached the corridor displayed on the monitor. At the far end stood the steel door labeled Studio B. The bound woman remained slumped beside it, barely conscious. Crow rushed forward cautiously, weapon drawn, scanning every shadow for movement. Elena followed, her recorder still running, capturing every second of the unfolding nightmare. They reached the woman quickly. Crow knelt beside her, checking her pulse. "She's alive," he confirmed. Elena gently lifted the woman's head. Her face was bruised, lips cracked from dehydration, her breathing shallow but steady. "I recognize her," Elena whispered suddenly. Crow looked up. "She's a podcaster from 2 counties over. She's been investigating missing persons cold cases." Crow cursed under his breath. She found the truth, and they turned her into part of the broadcast. Suddenly, the steel door behind them clicked loudly. Crow spun around. The door began unlocking itself. A slow mechanical hiss echoed through the corridor as it opened inward, revealing darkness inside. Red recording lights blinked on across the ceiling. The mechanical voice returned, softer now, almost welcoming. "Welcome to the final studio," it said, "where truth becomes permanent." Crow stood slowly, tightening his grip on his weapon. "Elena, stay behind me," he said quietly. But Elena stepped forward beside him instead. "No," she said. "If this ends the story, I'm seeing it through." Crow hesitated, then nodded. Together, they stepped inside Studio B. The room was massive, larger than any broadcast studio Elena had ever seen. Soundproofed walls lined with recording panels. Dozens of microphones hung from suspended arms. Old analog transmitters blended seamlessly with modern digital broadcasting systems. At the center of the room sat a single chair beneath a spotlight, and behind it, a figure stood silently in the shadows, partially hidden behind rows of equipment. Elena felt her heartbeat pounding in her ears. "Who are you?" she called out. The figure didn't respond immediately. Instead, it reached forward slowly, pressing a button on the control panel. Every microphone in the room activated simultaneously, and the mechanical voice disappeared, replaced by a real human voice. Low, calm, male. "The town demanded stories," the man said softly. "So I gave them stories they could never forget." The figure stepped forward into the dim red light. Elena's stomach dropped as she recognized him instantly. Standing before them was Arthur Kelman, the former owner of WXL Radio, the man officially listed as having disappeared after the fire. Crow raised his weapon immediately. "You're under arrest," he said sharply. Kelman smiled faintly. "You still don't understand," he replied calmly. "This broadcast never stopped." Behind them, heavy steel doors slammed shut automatically, locking them inside Studio B. The steel doors slammed shut with a thunderous echo that seemed to shake the entire chamber. The locking mechanisms clicked in rapid succession, sealing Studio B like a vault. Elena Ward felt her pulse spike, her throat tightening as she stared at the man standing beneath the dim red recording lights. Arthur Kelman, officially missing for nearly 20 years, standing alive in front of them. Sheriff Daniel Crow raised his weapon, his voice steady but charged with fury. "Arthur Kelman, you are under arrest for kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and multiple counts of murder." Kelman tilted his head slightly, almost amused. He was older now, his dark hair streaked with gray, his face lined with age but disturbingly calm. He wore a faded studio technician's jacket, its WXL logo barely visible under years of wear. "You still believe this is about crime," Kelman said quietly. "It's about truth." Elena stepped forward slightly, her recorder still running. "You kidnap people and force them to confess on air," she said sharply. "That isn't truth. That's torture." Kelman's faint smile didn't fade. "No," he said. "That is honesty without performance." Behind them, the red recording lights blinked faster. The air inside the studio felt suffocating, thick with electrical hums and the faint static leaking through dozens of microphones suspended overhead. Crow scanned the room quickly, searching for exits, security panels, anything that might override the locked doors. Deputy Harris and the remaining officers stood tense near the entrance, their weapons drawn but uncertain. "How did you survive the fire?" Crow demanded. Kelman slowly walked toward the center chair beneath the spotlight, placing his hand gently against its worn leather back. "I didn't survive it," he said softly. "I designed it." Elena felt her breath hitch. "You burned your own station?" she whispered. Kelman nodded slowly. The show had grown beyond control. Sponsors wanted entertainment. Listeners demanded darker stories. But the real confessions, the ones that mattered, frightened them. He gestured around the massive underground studio. "So I moved the broadcast where no one could censor it." Crow's grip tightened around his weapon. "And the employees who died?" Kelman's expression hardened slightly for the first time. "They panicked," he said. "They wanted to shut everything down. They threatened to expose the tunnels, the recordings, the callers who revealed secrets powerful people wanted buried." Elena stepped closer, anger flashing across her face. "So you killed them?" Kelman's voice lowered. "I preserved the truth." The room fell silent except for the hum of electrical currents flowing through the ancient broadcast equipment. Elena's mind raced, replaying Ethan Rowe's recorded message, the cages, the confessions, the missing persons tied to WXL's broadcasts. "You kidnapped callers," she said slowly. "You forced them to confess crimes, secrets, trauma, and aired it as entertainment." Kelman shook his head. "I never forced confession," he replied calmly. "I created an environment where masks fell away." Crow scoffed angrily. "You locked people in cages. I removed their illusions." Suddenly, one of the monitors flickered to life behind Kelman, displaying a rotating list of names. Elena recognized several immediately. Missing persons from Briar Hollow. Surrounding counties. Some cases dated back nearly 3 decades. "Every story deserves to be heard," Kelman said quietly. "The town loved them. They listened every night. They craved darkness. They just didn't want to admit it." Elena's hands trembled as she held her recorder tighter. "You're blaming the town for your crimes?" Kelman turned toward her slowly. "I'm holding up a mirror." Crow took a step forward. "You're done broadcasting," he said firmly. "Open the doors. Now." Kelman sighed softly. "You still believe this is about escape," he said. He reached toward a nearby control panel and pressed a button. Instantly, multiple screens inside the studio activated simultaneously. Live radio frequency monitors flickered across them. Waveforms danced in real time. The broadcast had already begun. Elena's stomach dropped. "You're transmitting right now?" she asked. Kelman nodded. "Every microphone in this room is live across 3 counties." Crow's eyes widened. "You're broadcasting this confrontation?" Kelman smiled faintly. "Truth demands witnesses." Elena realized something horrifying. "People are hearing everything we're saying." "Yes," Kelman replied calmly. "And they are listening very carefully." Crow stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You think exposing yourself on live radio protects you?" Kelman chuckled quietly. "No," he said. "It completes the story." He gestured toward the center chair beneath the spotlight again. "The final broadcast requires 3 voices," he said. "The storyteller, the investigator, and the law." Elena's pulse pounded violently. "You're insane," she whispered. Kelman's eyes darkened slightly. "No," he said quietly. "I am consistent." Behind them, the bound podcaster they had rescued stirred weakly, groaning softly as consciousness returned. Deputy Harris immediately moved to support her, checking her restraints and injuries. Kelman glanced toward her briefly. "She sought truth as well," he said. "Curiosity is always dangerous in Briar Hollow." Elena turned sharply toward him. "How many victims are still alive down here?" she demanded. Kelman paused, then answered calmly. "Only those strong enough to survive their own confessions." Elena's blood ran cold. Suddenly, alarms flashed across the control panel. Crow glanced toward the screens, confused. "What is that?" Kelman studied the monitor carefully, his calm expression faltering for the first time. "Interesting," he murmured. "What?" Elena demanded. Kelman tilted his head slightly. "It appears your colleagues have located one of the ventilation access tunnels." Crow's jaw tightened. "Backup is coming." Kelman smiled again, but it looked strained now. "They will not reach here in time." He walked toward a large console at the far end of the studio. Elena noticed a series of switches labeled with chilling precision. Archive release. Tunnel purge system. Final broadcast protocol. Crow stepped forward instantly. Step away from that console. Kelman turned slowly, his hand resting on the switches. You cannot stop the broadcast, he said quietly. Then we shut it down by force, Crow replied. Kelman shook his head. You misunderstand. The broadcast ends with confession. He looked directly at Crow. And every story demands one last confession. Elena's mind raced as she processed his words. You're going to kill us on air, she said. Kelman's voice softened almost sympathetically. No, he said. I'm going to let Briar Hollow hear what it created. Suddenly, another monitor flickered on, showing live radio listener call-in lines activating automatically. Hundreds of incoming calls flooded the system, their signals stacking into a chaotic digital storm. Elena stared at the screen, horrified. They're calling in, she whispered. They always do, Kelman said. Crow took another step forward, his weapon unwavering. This ends now, he said. Kelman looked at him carefully, almost respectfully. Yes, he said softly. It does. Without warning, Kelman slammed his hand onto the console. Red emergency lights flooded the studio. Heavy mechanical locks echoed through the tunnel system. And far beneath Briar Hollow, hidden explosives wired throughout the abandoned mining shafts armed themselves with a low, vibrating hum. Elena's heart slammed against her ribs. What did you just do? She shouted. Kelman looked toward the microphones as they descended slowly from the ceiling, positioning themselves around the center chair. I ensured the truth will never be buried again, he said. Crow lunged forward. Deputies followed instantly. But as they rushed toward Kelman, the floor beneath the center of the studio shifted slightly. Steel panels slid open, revealing another chamber beneath the broadcasting room. Inside it, rows of tapes, recordings, confession archives stacked endlessly like a library of human secrets. And below them, a timed demolition system counting down slowly. 10 o'clock. 9:59. 9:58. Elena gasped. He's going to destroy the tunnels, and the evidence. Crow grabbed Kelman by the collar, slamming him against the control panel. Stop it, he roared. Kelman smiled faintly despite the grip tightening around his throat. The broadcast will finish, he whispered. The town must hear the truth before it disappears forever. The countdown clock ticked steadily, and across Briar Hollow, radios everywhere began broadcasting live. The storm arrived without warning. Heavy rain battered the roof of the Black Hollow Sheriff's Department as Mara Ellison sat alone in the records room, staring at the blinking cursor on her computer screen. Outside, thunder rolled across the valley like distant artillery, rattling the old building's windows. It had been 3 days since the discovery beneath Black Hollow Church. 3 days since they uncovered human remains buried beneath the sanctuary floor. 3 days since the entire town had begun unraveling. And now, Mara was chasing something that felt even darker. Something older. Something hidden. The records room smelled of dust, mildew, and forgotten paperwork. Metal filing cabinets lined the walls like silent sentinels guarding decades of small-town secrets. Mara had been combing through missing persons reports from the last 30 years. At first, she was looking for patterns tied directly to Reverend Caleb Dern. But the deeper she dug, the more the timeline stretched backward, far beyond Dern's arrival in Black Hollow. It started with a name, Emily Roth. Missing, October 1991. Last seen leaving Sunday service at Black Hollow Church. The case had been closed within weeks. Classified as a probable runaway. Mara pulled the physical file from the cabinet and opened it carefully. The paper inside had yellowed with age, the ink slightly faded, but the details were still legible. Emily had been 17, honor student, no history of behavioral issues, no known reason to leave home. And yet, she vanished without a trace. Mara flipped through the report until something caught her attention. The investigating officer, Sheriff Thomas Grady, her predecessor's predecessor. Grady had served as sheriff for nearly 25 years before retiring in 2005. He was respected, trusted, a pillar of the community, and he had closed Emily Roth's case in less than 3 weeks. Mara's pulse quickened. She opened her laptop and searched for every missing persons case investigated by Sheriff Grady. 6 results appeared, all female, all between the ages of 16 and 22. All last seen within 1 mile of Black Hollow Church. All ruled as runaways. The storm outside intensified as Mara leaned closer to the screen, her heart pounding. 6 missing girls over 14 years. No connections. No suspects. No follow-ups. Just silence. A knock on the records room door made Mara jump. Deputy Ryan Cole stepped inside, carrying 2 cups of coffee. His uniform was damp from the rain, and his expression was tense. "You're still here," he said, setting a cup beside her keyboard. "Couldn't leave," Mara replied, sliding the files toward him. "Look at these." Ryan scanned the names, his brow furrowing. "Grady handled all of them?" "Every single one." Ryan let out a slow breath. "That's bad optics." "It's more than optics." Mara pointed at Emily Roth's file. "She disappeared after church, just like the remains we found beneath the sanctuary, and the timeline matches the bone dating Dr. Hargrove gave us." Ryan's face darkened. "You think Grady knew?" Mara didn't answer immediately. "I think," she said carefully, "that if Dern wasn't working alone, Grady might have been part of something bigger." Thunder cracked loudly enough to make the lights flicker. Ryan leaned against the desk, processing. "Grady still lives here," he said quietly. Mara looked up sharply. "He does. Retirement house near Hollow Creek. He keeps to himself now. Barely leaves the property." Mara felt a cold chill creep down her spine. "Have you ever met him?" "Once. At a 4th of July parade years ago." "What's he like?" Ryan hesitated. "Charming," he said finally. "The kind of guy who remembers everyone's name." Mara stood. "Let's pay him a visit." Ryan glanced at the rain hammering the windows. "Now?" "Yes. Before he hears about what we're finding and decides to disappear." Grady's house sat at the edge of Hollow Creek, surrounded by dense pine forest and miles of empty land. The rain turned the dirt road into thick mud, forcing Mara to slow the patrol SUV to a crawl. The house itself was modest but well maintained. A single-story structure with white siding and a wraparound porch illuminated by warm yellow lights. It looked peaceful. Too peaceful. Mara parked near the gate, and they stepped out into the rain. Ryan knocked firmly on the front door. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then footsteps approached from inside. The door opened. Sheriff Thomas Grady stood before them. Even in his 70s, he carried himself with quiet authority. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his posture remained straight and confident. "Mara Ellison," he said, smiling warmly. "I heard Black Hollow finally got itself a new sheriff." Mara blinked, slightly caught off guard. "You know who I am? I make it a habit to stay informed about town leadership." His eyes shifted to Ryan. "Deputy Cole, you've grown since the last time I saw you." Ryan nodded stiffly. "Sir." Grady stepped aside. "Come in. You're getting soaked." Inside, the house smelled of polished wood and coffee. Family photos lined the walls. Awards and commendations filled glass display cases. Newspaper clippings celebrated Grady's decades of service. Mara felt like she had stepped into a shrine dedicated to law enforcement legacy. Grady poured 3 cups of coffee without being asked. "To what do I owe this visit?" he asked, handing them mugs. Mara placed Emily Roth's file on the table between them. "We're reopening several missing persons cases," she said calmly. Grady's smile didn't falter. "Old cases tend to stay closed for good reason." "Emily Roth," Mara said. For the first time, something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition. Grady leaned back slowly. "That was a long time ago," he said. "6 girls," Mara continued. "All investigated by you. All connected to Black Hollow Church." Grady stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "Coincidences happen in small towns." "Not 6 times," Ryan said quietly. Grady looked at him, expression still pleasant, but his eyes hardened. "Young deputy," he said, "you should learn that patterns can be misleading." Mara leaned forward. "Did you ever suspect Reverend Dern?" Grady chuckled softly. "Dern arrived years after those girls disappeared." "Exactly," Mara said. Silence filled the room. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows. Grady set his coffee down carefully. "You think I covered something up?" he said. "I think," Mara replied, "that someone helped create an environment where these disappearances could happen without scrutiny." Grady studied her for a long moment. "You're new to Black Hollow," he said finally. "You don't understand how this town works. Then help me understand." Grady stood and walked toward the fireplace, resting his hands on the mantel. You know what keeps a town alive, Sheriff Ellison? Mara didn't respond. Stability, he said. Faith. Community trust. Black Hollow survived because people believed in their church. They believed in their leaders. He turned slowly. If I had stirred panic, accused the church without proof, this town would have torn itself apart. Ryan frowned. 6 girls disappeared. Grady's jaw tightened. 6 tragedies, he corrected, with no evidence of foul play. Mara's voice hardened. We found bodies beneath the church. Grady froze, just for a fraction of a second. But Mara saw it. He recovered quickly. That's unfortunate news, he said carefully. You didn't know? Mara asked. Grady met her gaze. No. The lie hung in the air like smoke. Mara stood. Do you have records from your investigations? Notes that weren't filed officially? Grady hesitated. I keep personal journals, he admitted. Old habit. Mara's pulse jumped. Can we see them? Grady looked toward the hallway leading deeper into the house. Then back at Mara. I suppose transparency is important. He disappeared down the hallway, leaving Mara and Ryan alone. Ryan leaned close and whispered, You think he's stalling? Yes. Or grabbing a weapon? Possibly. Ryan subtly adjusted his holster. The seconds stretched into minutes. Then Grady returned carrying 3 leather-bound journals. He placed them on the table gently. Everything I recorded, he said. You're welcome to review them. Mara opened the first journal carefully. Inside were meticulous handwritten notes. Interviews. Timelines. Observations. At first glance, they looked legitimate. But as she flipped deeper into the pages, something felt off. The language shifted. Certain details were vague. Witness statements cut short. Leads abandoned abruptly. And then she found it. A page near the center of the second journal. A list of names. Not just missing girls. Dozens of names. Beside each name was a symbol. A small circle with a cross drawn through it. Mara's heart slammed against her ribs. What is this? She asked quietly. Grady's expression remained unreadable. Church Outreach Registry, he said smoothly. Families receiving counseling support. Mara looked closer. Emily Roth's name was there. So were the other missing girls. But there were more. Names Mara didn't recognize. Names that weren't listed in any missing persons database. Ryan leaned forward. Why are some names crossed out? Grady smiled faintly. People who moved away. Lost contact. Mara closed the journal slowly. Her instincts screamed that he was lying. But she needed proof. Can we take these journals as evidence? She asked. Grady's smile faded. I'd prefer they stay here. They're personal property. Mara met his gaze. Then we'll need a warrant. Grady nodded calmly. Of course. The drive back to the station was silent, except for the rain. Ryan finally spoke. He's hiding something. Yes. You saw his reaction when you mentioned the bodies. I did. Ryan exhaled slowly. What now? Mara stared at the storm-soaked road ahead. Now we dig deeper. Back at the station, Mara ran the additional names from Grady's journal through national databases. Her stomach dropped as results began appearing. 3 names matched unidentified remains found in neighboring counties. 2 others were linked to cold cases dismissed as accidents. And one name returned a living person. A woman named Laura Bennett. Reported missing in 1998. Declared dead in 2001. But the system showed recent hospital records under her name. Mara leaned forward, heart racing. Ryan, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Yeah. I think we just found a survivor. Outside, the storm finally began to fade. But inside Black Hollow Sheriff's Department, something far more dangerous was gathering. Because if Laura Bennett was alive, then she might hold the key to everything. And Sheriff Thomas Grady might be connected to crimes far older and far darker than anyone in Black Hollow was prepared to face. The hospital sat on the far edge of Redwater County, 40 miles from Black Hollow. Mara drove through lingering mist left behind by the storm, her fingers gripping the steering wheel tightly as the early morning sun struggled to break through heavy clouds. Ryan sat beside her, reviewing printed records pulled from the database only an hour earlier. Laura Bennett, missing since 1998, declared legally dead in 2001. Yet medical files showed she had been admitted twice in the past year under the same name. No emergency contact. No listed family. And most disturbingly, a note in her psychiatric evaluation. Patient refuses to discuss past residents. Exhibits severe trauma responses when Black Hollow is mentioned. Ryan closed the folder slowly. She's been alive all this time, he said quietly. Hidden, Mara replied. Or hiding. Redwater Memorial Hospital looked outdated but functional. An aging brick structure with flickering fluorescent lights and a faint antiseptic smell that clung to the air. At the front desk, Mara presented her badge. We're here to speak with Laura Bennett. The nurse hesitated, scanning her computer screen. She's under protective psychiatric care, the nurse said carefully. Patient confidentiality laws. This involves a homicide investigation, Mara interrupted gently. And possibly multiple cold cases. The nurse swallowed and nodded. Room 314. The hallway leading to Laura's room felt eerily quiet. Mara's boots echoed against the polished tile as she approached the door. Ryan stopped just outside, giving her a reassuring nod. You want me inside? He asked. Let me talk to her first, Mara said. Ryan nodded. Mara knocked softly. No response. She knocked again. A faint voice from inside whispered, Go away. Mara opened the door slowly. Laura Bennett sat on the edge of her hospital bed, knees pulled tightly to her chest. Her dark hair hung loosely around her shoulders, streaked with premature gray. Deep shadows rested beneath her eyes, and thin scars lined her forearms, old, faded, but unmistakable. She looked older than her 42 years. Much older. Her gaze darted toward Mara, filled with immediate panic. I told them I'm not talking, Laura said, voice trembling. Mara raised her hands slightly in a calming gesture. I'm Sheriff Mara Ellison. I'm not here to hurt you. Laura's eyes widened slightly at the word sheriff. You're not from Black Hollow, Laura said quietly. Yes, Mara admitted. I am. Laura's breathing became uneven. You shouldn't have come. Mara stepped closer but kept her voice soft. Laura, we found remains beneath Black Hollow Church. Laura froze. Tears instantly filled her eyes. They're still there, she whispered. Who? Mara asked gently. Laura's lips trembled. The lost ones, she said. Mara pulled a chair beside the bed and sat down slowly. You were taken, Mara said. Weren't you? Laura stared at the floor for several seconds before nodding once. I was 17, she said. Youth choir. I stayed late after rehearsal. Her voice cracked. He told me God had chosen me. Mara felt her stomach twist. Reverend Dern. Laura shook her head. No. Mara's pulse spiked. Then who? Laura's eyes slowly lifted to meet hers. Sheriff Grady. The words hit like a gunshot. Mara struggled to keep her expression neutral. Tell me what happened, she said carefully. Laura wrapped her arms tighter around herself. He was respected. Everyone trusted him. When he pulled me over that night, I thought maybe my taillight was broken or something. Her voice trembled violently. He said he needed to take me somewhere safe. Said there were complaints about teenagers drinking in the woods. Tears rolled down her cheeks. He drove me behind the church. There's a service entrance, hidden behind the old maintenance shed. He had a key. Mara leaned forward slightly. What happened inside? Laura's entire body began shaking. There were candles, she whispered. Symbols carved into the walls. People wearing robes. Mara's blood ran cold. People, she repeated. Laura nodded. They called themselves the Circle of Renewal. Mara's mind raced. Who was in this circle? She asked. Laura hesitated. I never saw their faces clearly, she said. They wore masks. But I recognized voices. Whose voices? Laura swallowed hard. Church elders. Town leaders. People who stood on stage every Sunday pretending to be saints. Ryan, listening from the doorway, clenched his jaw. They believed sacrifice kept the town safe, Laura continued. They said each offering strengthened their bond with God, ensured prosperity, protection from disasters. Mara struggled to process the horror of what she was hearing. How did you survive? She asked softly. Laura stared at her hands. I wasn't supposed to. Laura explained that she had been locked inside a chamber beneath the church with several other girls. The rituals had taken place over months. Victims were kept isolated, manipulated, starved, and psychologically broken. I escaped during a storm, Laura said. The power went out. I found an unlocked maintenance tunnel that led to the cemetery. Did Grady know you escaped? Yes. Mara's chest tightened. He chased me, Laura said. I hid in the woods for 2 days. Then a truck driver found me on the highway. I told him my name was something else. I never told anyone where I came from. Silence filled the room. Mara finally spoke. Why come forward now? Laura laughed bitterly. I didn't. You found me. Mara hesitated before asking the question weighing heavily on her mind. Are they still operating? Laura's eyes filled with terror. Yes, she whispered. They never stop. They just change leaders. Ryan stepped inside. Do you know who leads them now? Laura looked between them. The shepherd, she said. Mara frowned. What does that mean? It's what they call their leader, Laura explained. Grady used that title after the old leader died. Ryan's voice hardened. And now? Laura's lips trembled. I think someone new took his place. Mara felt her pulse thunder. Do you know who? Laura shook her head slowly. No, but I heard Grady talking once. He said the town would never survive without the circle. Before Mara could ask another question, Laura grabbed her wrist suddenly. You have to be careful, she said urgently. They have people everywhere. Police, council members, even hospital staff. Mara exchanged a glance with Ryan. A cold realization settled over them both. If Laura was telling the truth, someone inside their own department could be involved. Later, as Mara and Ryan left the hospital, tension hung heavy between them. You believe her? Ryan asked. Yes. Then Grady isn't just covering up crimes. He helped run a cult. And if he passed leadership to someone else? Ryan finished the sentence quietly. Then we're hunting an entire network. Back at the station, Mara immediately began drafting a warrant to seize Grady's journals and search his property. But as she entered her office, she froze. Her desk drawers were open, files scattered across the floor. Her computer screen glowed with a blank login prompt. Ryan stepped in behind her. Did you leave it like this? No. Ryan scanned the room carefully. Someone's been here. Mara rushed to her evidence locker. Her stomach dropped. Grady's case files, the additional name list. Laura's preliminary statement. All gone. Ryan swore under his breath. Internal breach, he said. Mara nodded grimly. They know we're onto them. Before they could react further, Mara's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. This is Sheriff Ellison. Static crackled through the line. Then a distorted male voice spoke slowly. You should have left the past buried. Mara's grip tightened. Who is this? You've opened a door, the voice continued. And doors in Black Hollow only open one way. The call ended. Mara lowered the phone slowly. Ryan stared at her. What did they say? Mara swallowed. They just declared war. Across town, hidden deep within the pine forest surrounding Hollow Creek, a figure stood inside Sheriff Grady's house, flipping through a leather journal under dim lamplight. Gloved hands turned each page carefully. The figure paused at Laura Bennett's name, then crossed it out slowly with a black pen. A voice from the shadows spoke quietly. Is she alive? Yes, the figure replied calmly. Then we proceed sooner than planned. The lamplight flickered as thunder rumbled faintly in the distance once more. Back at the station, Mara stared at Black Hollow's town map pinned to her wall. Every church property, every abandoned building, every wooded area surrounding the valley. Somewhere out there, the circle of renewal was still operating, and now they knew she was hunting them. Mara grabbed her jacket and turned toward Ryan. We move fast, she said, before they disappear again. Ryan nodded. Where do we start? Mara stared at the church marked in red at the center of the map. With the place they thought we'd never look twice. The church looked harmless in daylight. Sunlight filtered through the tall stained glass windows of Black Hollow Church, painting colorful reflections across the stone steps and manicured lawn. A gentle breeze moved through the trees, rustling leaves with peaceful rhythm. To anyone passing by, it looked like the heart of a quiet, faithful community. But Mara Ellison now knew better. She stood across the street inside her parked SUV, watching parish volunteers prepare for the upcoming evening prayer service. Families walked in and out of the building casually, smiling, greeting each other like nothing was wrong. Like bodies hadn't been buried beneath their sanctuary for decades. Ryan sat beside her, reviewing the church blueprint Mara had pulled from municipal archives. You're sure there are more tunnels? He asked. There have to be, Mara said quietly. Laura described maintenance corridors that don't appear on these plans. Ryan tapped the page thoughtfully. Old buildings like this often have original construction layouts that never make it into modern records. Exactly, Mara replied. Ryan looked at her. You still think we have a leak inside the department? Mara didn't hesitate. Yes. She had replayed the break-in at her office 100 times in her mind. Whoever took the files knew exactly what they were looking for. No random destruction. No forced entry visible on exterior cameras. It meant one thing. Someone with access. Someone with keys. Someone who worked inside their own station. Mara checked her watch. Church offices close in 20 minutes. If we're going in, we do it quietly. Ryan nodded. No warrants yet? If the circle is still active, legal delays could give them time to vanish again. Ryan smirked faintly. Not exactly textbook procedure, Sheriff. No, Mara admitted. But neither is ritual murder. They waited until the last church volunteer left the parking lot before moving. The main entrance was locked, but Ryan already had gloves on and a lockpick kit in his hand. 5 seconds, he whispered. It took 3. The door clicked open softly. They stepped inside. The church interior was silent, dimly lit by soft afternoon light streaming through stained glass. The scent of old wood and candle wax lingered in the air. Mara moved carefully down the center aisle toward the altar. Her boots barely made a sound against the polished floor. Laura said the entrance was behind a maintenance shed, Ryan whispered. Outside, Mara said. But if there's a network of tunnels, there might be internal access points, too. They began searching behind the altar area, moving furniture quietly and inspecting the walls. Ryan stopped suddenly near the baptismal font. Sheriff, he whispered. Mara joined him. He pointed to the stone floor beneath the font. One tile looked slightly newer than the others. Mara knelt and ran her fingers across the edges. The grout line was faintly cracked, like it had been removed and replaced multiple times. Ryan crouched beside her. You thinking what I'm thinking? Yes. Ryan grabbed a crowbar from his utility belt. With careful pressure, he pried upward. The tile shifted, then lifted completely, revealing a dark opening beneath. Cold air rushed upward from the hole, and the faint smell of mildew and decay. Ryan switched on his flashlight and aimed it downward. Stone steps descended into darkness. Mara's pulse quickened. We go together, she said. Ryan nodded. The tunnel was narrower than Mara expected, with rough stone walls carved decades ago. Moisture dripped steadily from the ceiling, echoing through the confined space as they descended deeper underground. The temperature dropped quickly. Mara could feel goosebumps rising across her arms. How long do you think this has been here? Ryan whispered. Longer than any of us want to imagine. The staircase ended at a narrow corridor lined with flickering electric lanterns, still functional. Mara exchanged a look with Ryan. They've been here recently, she whispered. They moved forward cautiously. Symbols carved into the stone walls appeared every few feet. Circles, crosses, and a third marking Mara didn't recognize, a triangle surrounded by jagged lines. Ryan stopped to examine one carving. Laura mentioned symbols, he said. Not this one, Mara replied. The corridor eventually opened into a larger chamber. Mara's breath caught. Rows of wooden chairs faced a raised stone platform at the center of the room. Melted candle wax covered the floor like frozen tears. Rusted chains hung from iron rings embedded in the walls. And at the center of the platform, carved deeply into the stone, the circle of renewal symbol. Ryan swallowed hard. They held ceremonies down here. Mara stepped closer to the platform. The stone surface was stained dark. Years of stains. A sudden noise echoed from deeper in the tunnel. Footsteps. Both Mara and Ryan froze instantly, weapons drawn. The footsteps grew louder, then stopped. Complete silence followed. Ryan whispered, You hear that? Yes. Mara gestured toward a narrow passage branching off behind the chamber. They moved toward it slowly. The passage led to a small storage room filled with old boxes, candles, robes, and a wooden table covered with surgical tools. Mara's stomach twisted. These aren't ceremonial, Ryan said grimly. No, Mara agreed. They're practical. Ryan opened one of the boxes carefully. Inside were black robes folded neatly. Each robe had a small embroidered symbol stitched onto the collar. The same triangle surrounded by jagged lines. Mara examined one closely. Maybe this identifies rank or leadership, she said. Ryan nodded. We should photograph everything. He reached for his camera. But before he could take a picture, a faint metallic click echoed behind them. Mara spun around. The tunnel entrance they had entered through slammed shut with a heavy thud. The lanterns flickered violently. Then half of them went dark. Ryan rushed toward the corridor, pulling on the metal door. Locked from the outside. "Damn it," he shouted. Mara's heartbeat thundered in her ears. They knew we were coming. Ryan drew his weapon, scanning the darkness. "How many exits are there?" "No idea." A voice echoed through hidden speakers embedded somewhere in the tunnel walls. Distorted. Cold. "You should have listened, Sheriff." Mara's grip tightened on her gun. "Show yourself. You're trespassing on sacred ground." Ryan shouted. "Step into the light and say that again." Soft laughter echoed through the tunnel. "You've already seen too much." Suddenly, a loud grinding noise rumbled through the chamber. Mara turned just in time to see part of the stone floor shift open near the platform, revealing a deep pit beneath. Ryan grabbed her arm, pulling her back just before she stepped onto a collapsing tile. "Watch it," he shouted. Dust filled the air as loose stones fell into the darkness below. The voice spoke again. "Curiosity always leads to sacrifice." Mara forced herself to stay calm. "Who are you?" she demanded. Silence followed. Then, "You already know the title." Ryan looked at her slowly. "The Shepherd," he whispered. Mara scanned the chamber desperately. "Why continue this?" she shouted. "How many lives are enough?" The voice answered calmly. "Black Hollow survives because of us. It always has. You're murdering children." "They are offerings," the voice replied. "And offerings demand obedience." Ryan leaned close to Mara. "We need another exit." "Now." Mara nodded. They rushed toward the far end of the chamber, searching for additional tunnels. After several seconds of frantic searching, Ryan spotted a narrow crawlspace partially hidden behind stacked crates. "Here," he shouted. They pushed the crates aside and squeezed into the passage, just as another section of floor collapsed behind them. Dust and debris rained down as the chamber echoed with the shepherd's laughter. The crawlspace twisted through tight, suffocating turns before finally sloping upward toward a rusted metal ladder. Ryan climbed first, pushing open a heavy hatch at the top. Fresh air flooded down as sunlight spilled into the passage. They climbed out into the woods behind the church cemetery. Both collapsed onto the damp ground, breathing heavily. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, Ryan sat up. "They tried to kill us." "Yes," Mara said. Ryan stared toward the church spire rising above the trees. "They're not hiding anymore." Back at the station, Mara immediately reviewed security footage from earlier that afternoon. Her heart sank. One camera showed Deputy Alan Price entering the building 30 minutes before her office was discovered ransacked. Price had worked at the department for 12 years. Trusted, reliable, and currently on patrol duty. Ryan stared at the screen. "You think he's part of the circle?" Mara nodded slowly. "Or reporting directly to someone who is." Her phone buzzed suddenly. A text message from an unknown number appeared. "The mark reveals loyalty. Look beneath the skin." Mara frowned. "What does that mean?" Ryan's face went pale. Laura said circle members carried identifying symbols. Mara's pulse quickened. "Hidden tattoos," she whispered. Ryan looked at the department roster pinned to the wall. "Price always wears long sleeves," he said quietly. Mara grabbed her jacket. "Let's find out why." Across town, Deputy Alan Price sat alone inside his patrol car parked near Hollow Creek. He rolled up his sleeve slowly, revealing a faded tattoo near his wrist. A triangle surrounded by jagged lines. His phone buzzed. A single message appeared. "They found the tunnels. Prepare Phase 2. Price stared at the message, then glanced toward Sheriff Grady's distant house hidden among the trees. He started the engine slowly. Back at the station, Mara loaded her weapon with calm precision. Ryan stood beside her. "If Price is involved, how deep does this go?" he asked. Mara stared at the symbol printed on Laura's medical file. "Deeper than we're ready for," she said quietly. "Because if the Circle had infiltrated law enforcement, then Black Hollow wasn't just hiding secrets. It was protecting them." The rain returned just after sunset. It fell in thin, cold sheets across Black Hollow, turning the streets slick and reflective under flickering street lamps. The storm clouds hung low over the valley, swallowing the last traces of daylight as Mara Ellison and Ryan Cole drove silently toward Hollow Creek. Deputy Alan Price's patrol car had last pinged its GPS tracker just minutes earlier, parked near the abandoned ranger station deep within the state forest. Mara's jaw tightened as she gripped the steering wheel. "If Price runs," Ryan said, "we lose him." "He won't run," Mara replied quietly. Ryan glanced at her. "You sound certain." Mara stared at the dark road ahead. "He wants us to follow him." The narrow forest road twisted sharply through towering pine trees. Fog rolled in from the creek, creating a suffocating white curtain that swallowed their headlights beyond 20 feet. They found Price's patrol vehicle exactly where the tracker indicated, parked crookedly near the ranger station's crumbling wooden porch. Its emergency lights flashed silently, painting the surrounding forest in pulsing red and blue. But the car was empty. Ryan stepped out cautiously, hand resting on his holster. "This screams trap," he muttered. Mara nodded. "And we're walking straight into it." The ranger station looked abandoned for years. Its roof sagged slightly, and broken windows gaped like hollow eye sockets staring into the dark woods. Mara pushed the front door open slowly. It creaked loudly as they entered. Inside, dust covered every surface. Old park maps curled off the walls. Rusted filing cabinets stood open, spilling yellowed papers across the floor. But the center of the room looked recently disturbed. A lantern flickered on a wooden table. And beside it, Deputy Alan Price sat calmly in a chair, hands resting on his knees. Waiting. Ryan immediately drew his weapon. "Don't move." Price raised his hands slowly. "I'm not armed," he said. Mara stepped forward cautiously. "Roll up your sleeve," she ordered. Price obeyed without hesitation. The triangle tattoo surrounded by jagged lines stared back at them. "Proof." Ryan cursed under his breath. "You've been feeding them information." Price's lips curled into a faint smile. "I've been protecting Black Hollow." Mara's voice hardened. "You've been helping murder children." Price's eyes darkened slightly. "You don't understand what this town is without the circle." "Then explain it to me," Mara said coldly. Price leaned back slightly, his expression eerily calm. Black Hollow was dying 50 years ago. Businesses closing. Families leaving. Floods destroying farmland. Disease outbreaks. It was falling apart. Mara remained silent. "Then the circle revived it," Price continued. "Prosperity followed. The mines reopened. Tourism grew. Disasters stopped." Ryan scoffed. "You're telling me human sacrifice fixes economic downturns?" Price's gaze remained steady. "I'm telling you it worked." Mara stepped closer. "Who leads the circle now?" Price smiled faintly. "You already met him." Mara's pulse quickened. "Grady?" Price shook his head slowly. "Grady retired." Ryan frowned. "Then who?" Price's eyes locked onto Mara. "You trust him," Price said softly. The room suddenly felt colder. Before Mara could respond, Price leaned forward. "Tell me, Sheriff, who insisted on helping you reopen the church investigation, who had access to every department file, who pushed you toward the tunnels?" Mara's stomach twisted violently. "No," she whispered. Price's smile widened. "Deputy Ryan Cole." Ryan froze beside her. Mara turned slowly. Ryan stared back at her, eyes filled with shock. "That's insane," Ryan said. "You know me." Price chuckled. "Of course she does. That's why you were chosen." Ryan's hand tightened around his weapon. "Shut up." Price leaned back calmly. "You were raised here, Ryan. Your father served under Grady. Your family has attended Black Hollow Church for 3 generations. Ryan's breathing grew heavier. "That doesn't mean anything." "It means everything," Price replied quietly. Mara's mind raced. "Ryan," she said carefully. Ryan shook his head quickly. "You believe him?" "I don't know what to believe." Price watched them both with quiet amusement. "Ryan doesn't even know," he said. "Not yet." Ryan's face paled. "What are you talking about?" Price reached slowly into his jacket pocket. Ryan raised his gun instantly. "Don't." Price stopped. "Relax. It's not a weapon." He pulled out a folded photograph and slid it across the table toward Mara. She picked it up cautiously. Her heart stopped. The photo showed a ceremonial gathering inside the underground chamber beneath the church. Robed figures stood in a circle around the stone platform, and standing at the center, unmasked, was Ryan's father, Sheriff Daniel Cole. Ryan staggered backward slightly. "That's fake," he whispered. "It's from 1996, Price said calmly. "Your father was the shepherd before Grady." Silence crushed the room. Ryan's hands trembled. He died in a car accident," Ryan said weakly. Price nodded slowly. "Yes, after trying to leave the circle." Mara's chest tightened as realization dawned. "You think Ryan is meant to replace him," she said. Price's smile returned. "He's been groomed his entire life." Ryan shouted, "That's a lie." Suddenly, a gunshot shattered the air. The lantern exploded as glass and flame burst across the table. Mara grabbed Ryan and pulled him behind an overturned desk as bullets tore through the station walls. "Snipers!" Ryan shouted. Price dropped to the floor, crawling toward a hidden hatch beneath the table. Mara aimed at him. "Don't move." Price smirked. "You're already too late." He disappeared into the hatch, slamming it shut behind him. Gunfire intensified outside. Wood splintered as rounds punched through the ranger station walls. Mara and Ryan returned fire blindly toward muzzle flashes in the forest. "We're surrounded," Ryan shouted. Mara scanned the room desperately. "Back exit!" They sprinted through a narrow hallway just as the front wall exploded inward from shotgun blasts. They burst out the rear door into the rain-soaked forest, sprinting through mud and branches as gunfire echoed behind them. After several minutes of running, they collapsed behind a fallen tree trunk, breathing heavily. Ryan stared at the ground, shaking violently. "My father," he whispered. Mara placed a hand on his shoulder. "We don't know the full story yet." Ryan looked up, eyes filled with rage and confusion. "But they think I'm next." Mara's radio crackled suddenly. Dispatch shouted frantically. "Sheriff! Emergency call from Redwater Hospital. Laura Bennett has been attacked." Mara's blood turned to ice. "Is she alive?" "Critical condition. Suspect fled the scene." Ryan slammed his fist into the ground. "They're cleaning up witnesses." Mara stood instantly. "Then we move faster." They raced back toward the SUV, unaware that hidden cameras tracked their escape from deep within the forest. Hours later, inside the ICU waiting room, Mara stood outside Laura's hospital room as doctors worked frantically inside. A nurse approached slowly. "She's stable for now," the nurse said. Mara exhaled shakily. "Can she talk?" "Briefly." Laura looked weaker than before, tubes and monitors surrounding her fragile body. Her skin was pale, her breathing shallow. But when Mara entered, Laura's eyes opened slightly. "They know," Laura whispered. "Yes," Mara said gently. "We need to know who the shepherd is." Laura's lips trembled. "He visits the church every Sunday," she whispered. Mara leaned closer. "Who, Laura?" Laura struggled to speak. "The mayor," she whispered weakly. Mara's heart dropped. "Mayor Harold Vance?" Laura nodded faintly. "He controls everything: council, police, church board. He inherited the circle after Grady stepped down." Mara stepped back slowly, her mind spinning. "The mayor. The most powerful man in Black Hollow." Laura grabbed her wrist weakly. "He's planning something," she whispered. "A final ceremony, tomorrow night, eclipse." Mara's pulse thundered. "Where?" Laura's voice barely escaped her lips. "Old mine shaft outside town." Her eyes closed as machines beeped louder. Doctors rushed in. Mara stepped aside as nurses pushed her toward the hallway. Ryan stood waiting outside. "What did she say?" Mara met his gaze. "We finally know who the shepherd is." Ryan's voice trembled. "Who?" Mara swallowed hard. "The mayor." Thunder rolled across Black Hollow as Mara stared out the hospital window toward the distant mountains where the abandoned mines waited in darkness. Tomorrow night, during the eclipse, the Circle of Renewal planned their largest ritual yet. And if they failed to stop it, Black Hollow's darkest secret would claim new victims. The sky darkened long before nightfall. Thick clouds rolled across the mountains surrounding Black Hollow, merging with the eerie twilight cast by the approaching solar eclipse. The town buzzed with unusual energy, streets quieter than normal, businesses closing early, church bells ringing without scheduled service. Mara Ellison stood beside her patrol SUV parked along the dirt trail leading toward the abandoned Hawthorne mine. Dozens of police vehicles waited behind her, engines idling softly. State investigators, tactical units, and emergency medics prepared in tense silence. Tonight would end the circle of renewal, or bury the truth forever. Ryan Cole approached, fastening his tactical vest. His expression remained tight, distant, haunted by the revelations about his father and the circle's expectation that he would inherit leadership. "You ready?" Mara asked quietly. Ryan nodded once. "I need to see it through," he said. The Hawthorne Mine entrance sat halfway up a jagged hillside, its rusted metal framework silhouetted against the dimming sky. Wooden support beams creaked under the wind. Warning signs still hung from the fence, faded and ignored by time. But floodlights glowed faintly from inside the tunnel. They were already there. Mara raised her radio. "All units hold positions until my signal. We go in silent first." Acknowledgements crackled back. Mara turned to Ryan. "If this goes wrong—" "It won't," Ryan said firmly. Mara studied him carefully. "You don't owe this town your life." Ryan stared toward the mine entrance. "My father tried to escape them," he said quietly. "He died for it." He looked back at her. "I'm not running." They approached the mine cautiously, stepping over broken fencing and rotting railroad tracks leading into the mountain's dark throat. The air smelled damp and metallic, carrying faint echoes of chanting from deep within the tunnels. Mara's pulse pounded. "They've already started." Ryan nodded grimly. The tunnel descended steeply, lit by flickering torches placed along the walls. The rhythmic chanting grew louder as they moved deeper underground. Mara signaled for tactical teams to hold behind them. "This ends with us," she whispered. Ryan nodded. They reached a cavernous chamber carved naturally into the mountain's core. Mara froze. Nearly 30 robed figures stood in a massive circle around a raised stone altar. Candles formed intricate symbols across the cavern floor, their flames trembling under rising wind currents. And bound to the altar, a teenage girl, unconscious but breathing, wrists chained above her head. Mara's stomach dropped. Standing at the center of the circle, Mayor Harold Vance raised his arms toward the cavern ceiling as eclipsed shadows began creeping across the opening far above the chamber. "Tonight," Vance declared loudly, "we renew the covenant that has protected Black Hollow for generations." Mara stepped forward, weapon drawn. "It ends now, Mayor." The chanting stopped instantly. Robed figures turned toward her and Ryan as Vance lowered his arms slowly. He smiled calmly. "I wondered when you'd arrive, Sheriff Ellison." Ryan stepped beside Mara, his voice shaking with restrained fury. "You killed people for power." Vance shook his head gently. "We preserve this town." "You sacrificed children." Ryan shouted. "They were chosen," Vance replied calmly. Mara scanned the crowd. Some robes shifted nervously. Some members stepped back slightly. Others stood rigid, loyal. "Drop your masks." Mara shouted. "This ends tonight." Several figures hesitated. Then one robe fell to the ground. It revealed Black Hollow's town council treasurer. Another robe dropped. A local school principal. More followed. A banker. A church elder. Members of Black Hollow's most respected families. Ryan stared in horror. "They're everywhere." Vance raised a hand. The remaining masked members froze. "You misunderstand your victory, Sheriff," he said quietly. "This ceremony isn't about power anymore." The eclipse shadow reached the cavern opening, plunging the chamber into dim, unnatural twilight. Vance turned toward Ryan. "It's about succession." Ryan's blood ran cold. "You groomed him for this moment," Vance continued calmly. "His bloodline has always led the circle." Ryan's voice trembled with rage. "My father tried to stop you." Vance nodded respectfully. "Yes, and he died refusing his destiny." Ryan stepped forward, shaking. "I'm not him." Vance smiled faintly. "You are exactly him." Mara stepped between them, weapon unwavering. "Release the girl. Now." Vance sighed. "You're too late for that." Suddenly, hidden gates slammed shut around the cavern, sealing every exit. Tactical teams shouted over Mara's radio as signals died abruptly. Vance gestured calmly. "Black Hollow survives because sacrifices are made willingly or otherwise." Mara fired a warning shot into the stone beside him. "It's over, Vance." The robed members shifted nervously. Several removed their masks fully, panic overtaking loyalty. "This was supposed to stay hidden," one whispered. "We never agreed to this," another said. Ryan stepped toward the altar, fury blazing in his eyes. Let her go. Vance studied him carefully. You don't understand the burden of leadership yet. Ryan raised his weapon. Try me. Vance slowly reached into his robe. Mara shouted, Don't. But instead of a weapon, Vance pulled out an old leather journal. Ryan froze. Mara recognized it immediately. Sheriff Daniel Cole's journal. Ryan's father's. Vance tossed it onto the altar. Your father documented everything, Vance said softly. He believed confession would free him. Ryan picked it up slowly, flipping through pages filled with frantic handwriting. Please, warnings, and finally, if Ryan ever finds this run, destroy them. Do not become me. Ryan's hands trembled violently. Vance stepped closer. Your father was weak, he said quietly. He chose guilt over duty. Ryan's eyes filled with tears. No, he whispered. He chose humanity. Vance's calm expression cracked slightly. And that is why he failed. Ryan suddenly lowered his weapon. Mara stared at him in shock. Ryan? Ryan turned toward the circle members slowly. My father was right, he said. He stepped forward toward Vance. For Black Hollow to survive. Vance smiled. The circle must end. Ryan lunged forward, tackling Vance against the stone altar. The mayor stumbled backward as Ryan ripped the ceremonial dagger from Vance's belt and hurled it across the cavern. Mara fired into the ceiling, shouting, Police! Everyone dropped to the ground. Chaos erupted. Several circle members fled toward sealed exits, pounding desperately on locked gates. Others dropped to their knees, surrendering instantly. Vance struggled against Ryan, pulling a concealed pistol from inside his robe. Mara fired once. The bullet struck Vance's shoulder, spinning him backward onto the cavern floor. Tactical teams finally breached the gates using explosive charges, flooding the cavern with armed officers. Within minutes, the circle of renewal collapsed into screaming arrests, restraints, and stunned disbelief. Mara rushed toward the altar, freeing the unconscious girl from her chains as medics rushed in behind her. Ryan stood over Vance, breathing heavily as officers restrained the wounded mayor. Vance looked up at Ryan, blood pooling beneath him. You destroyed your own legacy, he whispered. Ryan stared down coldly. I saved my father's. Hours later, dawn broke over Black Hollow as police vehicles lined every street. Arrests spread across town. Council members, church officials, business leaders, and law enforcement personnel exposed as members of the Circle. The town's darkest secret had finally surfaced. Days later, Mara stood beside Ryan at the memorial erected for the victims beneath Black Hollow Church. Names once forgotten were now engraved permanently in stone. Ryan placed his father's journal at the base of the memorial. He tried to stop them, Ryan said quietly. And you finished it, Mara replied. Ryan stared across the quiet town. Do you think Black Hollow survives this? Mara watched sunrise light spread across the valley. Truth destroys illusions, she said softly. But it gives people the chance to rebuild honestly. As they turned to leave, construction crews continued excavating tunnels beneath the church. One worker shouted suddenly, Sheriff, you need to see this. Mara and Ryan approached. Workers had uncovered another sealed chamber hidden deeper beneath the original ritual site. Inside, old robes, candles, and a second symbol carved into the stone floor. Not the circle of renewal. Something older. Something far more elaborate. Ryan stared at it uneasily. You think it's connected? Mara studied the symbol carefully, unease settling in her chest. I think, she said slowly, the circle might not have been the beginning. Behind them, the wind whispered through Black Hollow's streets, carrying echoes of secrets long buried, and perhaps not entirely gone. Story 2. The town of Mill Creek was small enough that everyone knew each other's birthdays, but large enough that some secrets could hide in plain sight. Nestled between dense pine forests and the lazy sweep of the river, the town seemed idyllic to outsiders. But Mara Ellison, now a seasoned investigator after her last case in Black Hollow, knew better. Darkness had a way of crawling into the quietest towns, and Mill Creek had already begun whispering its secrets. It started with a body. Late one Tuesday morning, the riverbank near the old mill revealed something unusual. A woman, half submerged, face pale, eyes wide open, hands stiff in the cold water. Her clothes were soaked and muddy, her red scarf tangled around a tree root. Local sheriff deputies had found her before Mara arrived, and the scene was eerily pristine. No signs of struggle, no footprints nearby, and no witnesses. Mara crouched beside the river, studying the body. Her breath misted in the crisp autumn air. "She doesn't belong here," she muttered. "No ID, no wallet, nothing." Deputy Ryan Cole, her trusted partner from Black Hollow, stepped forward. "Any idea who she is?" he asked. Mara shook her head slowly. "Not yet, but whoever left her here wanted her found, or maybe wanted to send a message." The river itself seemed to whisper that night. Leaves rustled like voices, the water lapping against the shore in uneven rhythms. Mara's instincts told her that this was no ordinary murder. The victim had been in the water for hours, maybe overnight. And yet, the body's condition suggested something deliberate, almost ritualistic. The hands, the placement of the scarf, even the angle at which the body had been left, all signs pointed to someone meticulous, someone who understood both human behavior and the subtle art of fear. Mara pulled out her camera and snapped several pictures of the scene before the coroner arrived. Each image felt like a key, a silent witness she could interrogate later. When the coroner finally lifted the body, Mara lingered by the river, letting the autumn wind carry away the smell of wet earth and decay. "Mill Creek hides its sins well," she said quietly, "but no town keeps them forever." And somewhere upstream, beyond the bend of the river and the edge of the forest, someone watched from the shadows, knowing the game had begun. The morning sun barely broke through the fog that clung to Mill Creek. Streets that were usually bustling with children walking to school and shopkeepers opening their doors were eerily quiet. Mara Ellison drove slowly through the town's center, her eyes scanning every storefront, every passerby. Despite the calm, an undercurrent of unease pulsed beneath the surface. The victim had been identified later that morning. Her name was Emily Shaw, a 28-year-old freelance journalist who had recently moved to Mill Creek. No family in town, no established friends. She had arrived just 6 months prior, renting a small apartment near the riverbank. Mara parked her SUV outside the local police station, stepping out into the damp air. Ryan Cole followed closely, carrying a thick folder of Emily's background information. "Nothing suspicious in her profile," Ryan muttered, flipping through pages. "No criminal record, no mental health issues, no previous threats." Mara nodded slowly. And yet someone wanted her dead, or at least terrified enough to place her here, like a message. The station was a modest brick building, its walls lined with faded portraits of past sheriffs. Mara stepped inside, greeting Chief Harold Finch. A stocky man with thinning hair and eyes that had seen too many winters, Finch looked uneasy. "You found her?" he asked immediately, concern etched across his face. "Yes," Mara said bluntly. "And it wasn't random." Finch sighed, rubbing his temples. "You think someone local?" "Almost certainly," Mara replied. "Emily didn't know anyone here long enough for a stranger from outside to track her with such precision. Whoever did this is patient, meticulous." Ryan chimed in. "And probably watching. Whoever left her in the river knew she'd be found quickly." Finch frowned. "The town council's already nervous. They want this handled quietly. No panic, no media frenzy." Mara's jaw tightened. "No promises. Justice isn't quiet." They began their investigation at Emily's apartment. The small unit was on the 3rd floor of an aging brick building near Mill Creek's industrial district. The air smelled faintly of damp wood and decaying leaves. Mara walked through the apartment methodically. Everything seemed ordinary. A cluttered desk with notebooks, a laptop, a camera bag, and half-drunk cups of coffee. Nothing seemed out of place, except for a single envelope, sealed and tucked under a stack of notebooks. She picked it up carefully, breaking the seal. Inside were photographs, blurry, grainy shots of Mill Creek at night. Street corners, empty parking lots, alleyways. But one photo made her blood run cold. It was a picture of Emily walking toward the riverbank the night before her death. Someone had followed her. Someone had watched. Ryan examined the photo, his face pale. This wasn't just stalking. They wanted her scared before they acted. Mara nodded grimly. "Exactly. And we need to figure out who." Next, they interviewed neighbors. Most were reluctant to talk. Mill Creek residents valued privacy, and the recent wave of disappearances in neighboring counties had made them wary of outsiders. One elderly woman, Mrs. Clara Hensley, finally spoke. I saw Emily sometimes walking near the mill, she said, her voice trembling. She liked to take pictures of the river at dawn, said it reminded her of calm before the storm. Did she seem worried? Mara asked. Mrs. Hensley nodded. Yes. A few nights ago, she mentioned seeing shadows by the river, said she thought someone was following her. Ryan exchanged a look with Mara. That's consistent with the envelope. She knew she was being watched. Mara scribbled notes in her pad. Good. Now we know this wasn't impulsive. It's targeted, and that means someone in Mill Creek had time to plan. By late afternoon, Mara and Ryan had compiled a list of potential leads. Town officials, local business owners, even a few older residents who had influence behind the scenes. One name kept recurring: Simon Granger, owner of Mill Creek Foundry and a prominent figure in town politics. Known for his wealth and connections, Granger had a reputation for enforcing loyalty, quietly but effectively. They decided to pay him a visit. His mansion sat atop a hill overlooking Mill Creek, an imposing structure with manicured lawns and a wrought iron gate. Mara's SUV slowed as they approached. A tall man with slick-back hair and a tailored suit greeted them at the door. He smiled, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. Sheriff Ellison, Granger said smoothly. I heard about the unfortunate incident by the river. Terrible business. Mara studied him. We're investigating. I need to ask you a few questions. Granger gestured to a sitting area inside his mansion. Of course. Anything to help. Once seated, Mara began. Where were you last night, Mr. Granger? He leaned back casually. At home. Reading. With my wife. Alone? Ryan asked. Granger's smile didn't falter. Well, my staff was around, but yes, essentially alone in the main house. Mara continued. Do you know Emily Shaw? Granger shook his head. Not personally. She was new in town, yes? Perhaps she crossed paths with my employees, but I wouldn't know her. Ryan narrowed his eyes. You were seen driving near the riverbank the night before she died. Granger laughed softly. Preposterous. You're grasping at straws. Mara made a note. We'll see. After leaving the mansion, Mara and Ryan drove back toward the river. The autumn wind had picked up, rustling through the trees like whispers of warning. She's not the first one, Ryan said quietly. Emily Shaw, maybe she's the latest in a pattern we're only beginning to see. Mara's mind raced. Exactly. And the pattern leads us to powerful people, people who think they're untouchable. Ryan shivered. You think the council knows something? Mara clenched her jaw. I know they do. And someone doesn't want us digging too deep. That night, Mara couldn't sleep. She stared out her hotel window at the dimly lit streets of Mill Creek. Somewhere, hidden in the shadows, someone was watching. Waiting. She pulled out Emily's photographs again, tracing the blurred shapes with her finger. Something about them seemed deliberate. Not just a threat, but a message. A puzzle. Her phone buzzed suddenly. A text from an unknown number appeared. Stop digging, or you'll be next. Mara stared at the screen, heart pounding. Ryan appeared at the doorway. I saw the text. Mara nodded. It's time we stop pretending this is random. Whoever is behind this is organized, dangerous, and they know we're onto them. The next morning, Mara and Ryan returned to the riverbank. The water had receded slightly, revealing footprints leading toward the old mill. They followed the trail carefully, eyes scanning for clues. Near the mill, Mara spotted something strange, a small wooden carving, a tiny figure holding a lantern. It was crudely made, but unmistakably left as a sign. They want us to find this, Mara said softly. They're guiding us, or mocking us. Ryan crouched beside the carving. Could be a symbol like a signature. Mara studied it carefully. Yes, whoever did this wants to be known. They're proud, or arrogant, maybe both. As they approached the mill, the doors creaked in the wind. Inside, the space was vast and empty, dust motes dancing in the sunlight streaming through broken windows. But Mara's instincts screamed. They weren't alone. A shadow shifted in the corner. A figure stepped forward, tall, draped in a hooded cloak, face obscured. You shouldn't be here, the figure said, voice low and commanding. Mara raised her weapon. Who are you? The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, a single hand reached into the cloak, revealing a small, intricately carved wooden figure, the same as the one outside. You're close, the figure whispered. Too close. Some secrets in Mill Creek are meant to stay buried. Before Mara could react, the figure darted past a side door into the shadows, disappearing into the mill's labyrinthine interior. Ryan swore under his breath. They're trying to lead us somewhere. Mara nodded. And we're following. But we do this smart. One wrong move, and Emily won't be the last victim. As they ventured deeper into the mill, Mara's mind raced. The clues, the warnings, the patterns, they all pointed to something far larger than a single murder. Mill Creek streets, its council, its churches, even the businesses, they weren't just hiding secrets. They were hiding someone or something that had been orchestrating terror for years. And somewhere, just ahead in the darkness, the face behind the masks waited. The old Mill Creek mill had a reputation in town for being haunted, though most dismissed the stories as folklore. Mara Ellison, however, didn't believe in ghosts. She believed in people, and people could be far more terrifying. The wind whistled through broken windows as Mara and Ryan entered the mill's main floor. Dust and decay clung to every surface. Wooden beams, darkened with age, stretched overhead, while the remnants of rusted machinery littered the floor. The faint smell of iron and mildew hung in the air. Mara's flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing the pattern of the shadows. Every step they took echoed in the cavernous interior. "Stay sharp," Mara whispered, her voice steady. "Whoever left the wooden figures, they're probably still here." Ryan nodded, scanning the floor carefully. "Feels like walking into a trap." Mara agreed silently. Something about the mill didn't feel empty. The footprints they had followed earlier ended abruptly at the base of a large, rotting staircase leading to the upper floors. The shadows there seemed to move in rhythm with the wind, or maybe with someone watching them. They ascended cautiously, every creak of the stairs sounding like a gunshot in the silence. At the top, a narrow hallway stretched before them, lined with locked doors. Faded signs indicated offices once used for the mill's administrative staff, but most were now just empty shells. A sudden scuffing noise came from the far end. Mara froze, signaling Ryan to stay back. "Hello," she called softly. "We know someone's here. Step out into the light." The scuffing stopped. A faint whisper echoed from somewhere deep within the hall. "You shouldn't be here," the voice said, low, deliberate, taunting. Mara tightened her grip on her weapon. "Who are you? Show yourself." A shadow moved along the wall, disappearing behind a doorway. Mara and Ryan exchanged a glance before following. The doorway led to an old storage room filled with crates of rotting supplies. Among the broken furniture and debris, Mara spotted more wooden carvings. Tiny figures holding lanterns, each one different, each one meticulously crafted. "They're leaving a trail," Ryan said, "like a breadcrumb path." Mara frowned. "Or a trap. We can't be sure yet." She crouched, inspecting the carvings. Something about them seemed ritualistic, symbolic. One figure had markings etched into its base, a triangle intersected by 3 horizontal lines. Mara recognized the pattern immediately. It matched the markings on the envelope from Emily Shaw's apartment. "They're connected," she murmured. "All of it, the photos, the carvings, the threats, they all lead back to the same source." Ryan looked uneasy. "And whoever it is, they've been planning this for months, maybe years." They followed the trail deeper into the mill, stepping carefully to avoid the broken machinery and splintered wood. Eventually, the hallway opened into a larger chamber, a former assembly room for the mill workers. The space was massive, stretching over 100 feet across, with high ceilings and thick wooden support beams. At the center of the room was something that made Mara's stomach drop, a large, circular symbol carved into the floor, surrounded by a dozen small wooden figures arranged like pieces on a chessboard. Candle stubs, some burnt down to nothing, littered the floor around the circle. "This is definitely ritualistic," Mara whispered. "Not just a warning, a display." Ryan approached the carvings cautiously. "Look at the symbols," he said. "Every single one has initials carved into the base. These aren't random, they're markers." Mara knelt, examining the closest figure. She could barely make out the letters. "Yes, Emily Shaw." Her breath caught. "This isn't just a warning. They're planning their next victim." Suddenly, a door at the far side of the chamber creaked open. Both Mara and Ryan spun toward the sound, weapons raised. A figure stepped into the light, a man mid-40s, dressed in a dark hoodie and jeans, face partially obscured by shadows. "Looking for me?" he asked, voice casual, almost amused. Mara's heart pounded. Who are you? The man smiled faintly. You really should have stayed in your office, Sheriff. Ryan stepped forward. We know you're connected to Emily's death. Tell us what you want. The man tilted his head, studying them like a predator assessing prey. I want the town to remember why it exists. Why Mill Creek survives. Mara's jaw tightened. By killing innocent people? He shrugged. Innocent is a relative term. Everyone here wears a mask, Sheriff. Some of us just take it off faster than others. The man suddenly moved, fast, darting toward the stairs at the opposite end. Mara and Ryan gave chase, sprinting across the assembly room. The floorboards groaned under their weight, echoing through the empty mill. He vanished into a side corridor, and Mara paused, realizing it might be a dead end. But Ryan pointed to a trapdoor slightly ajar at the base of the wall. Here, he shouted. He went down. Mara pulled it open, revealing a steep ladder descending into darkness. They climbed carefully, flashlights cutting through the black. At the bottom, they found themselves in a subterranean network, narrow tunnels carved beneath the mill, damp and foul-smelling. Rusted pipes ran along the walls, dripping water onto the floor. The tunnels twisted in every direction, and the faint smell of candle wax lingered in the air. This is extensive, Mara muttered. Someone put serious work into this. The tunnels opened into a hidden chamber, larger than anything Mara had imagined. Stone walls, low ceilings, and dozens of small alcoves lined the space. In the center was a raised platform, covered with black cloth, and atop it more wooden figures, each carefully arranged with symbols etched into their bases. And at the far end of the chamber, chained to the wall, were several envelopes, letters addressed to people across Mill Creek. Each one was sealed, identical to the envelope Emily Shaw had received. Mara's stomach twisted. This isn't just about Emily, it's a network. They've been collecting information, targeting people for months. Ryan's voice was tight. Do you think Emily was the first? Mara shook her head slowly. No, she's just the first one we know about. And if we don't stop them, she won't be the last. A sudden noise echoed through the chamber. Mara spun toward it, flashlight trembling slightly. A figure emerged from the shadows, the same man from the assembly room, holding a lantern that flickered violently. Impressive, he said. You found the heart of the mill. Most people never get this far. Mara raised her weapon. Who are you? Why Emily? Why this town? He smiled under the hood. Mill Creek is special. It's a collection of the willing, the obedient, and the ambitious. People who understand that to survive, some sacrifices must be made. Ryan stepped beside Mara, gripping his weapon. We're ending this tonight. The man laughed softly. You can try. But the circle, the network, it's bigger than you know. And it doesn't end with Emily Shaw. Mara felt the weight of his words. They weren't just dealing with a single killer. They were up against something embedded in the town itself. He suddenly darted into a side passage, disappearing into darkness. Mara and Ryan pursued, their hearts pounding. The tunnels twisted, turning back on themselves in a confusing maze. Water dripped from the ceiling, making each step treacherous. Eventually, they reached a dead end, but Mara's flashlight revealed something carved into the stone wall. A symbol identical to the one on Emily's envelopes, a triangle intersected by 3 horizontal lines. They're marking territory, Ryan muttered. Like a signature. Mara touched the symbol lightly, her mind racing. Or a warning. Whoever left this wants to be found, or wants us to follow. They pressed forward, deeper into the tunnels, unaware of cameras hidden in the walls, silently recording every move. Every breath they took, every step, they were being watched. Hours later, as Mara and Ryan emerged into a secondary chamber, they found themselves face to face with several robed figures. Masks covered their faces, their eyes glinting in the candlelight. You've gone too far, one of them said, voice muffled by the mask. Some things in Mill Creek are not meant to be uncovered. Mara squared her shoulders. We know what you've been doing. It ends tonight. The figures moved forward in unison, slow and deliberate. Mara glanced at Ryan, who nodded grimly. Stay close, he whispered. Mara's heart hammered in her chest. This was no longer just about Emily Shaw. The network had revealed itself, and now the final confrontation was unavoidable. And somewhere deeper in the shadows, the mastermind watched, knowing that the next move would decide the fate of Mill Creek. and everyone in it. The candlelight flickered across the faces of the robed figures, their masked features catching the glow in grotesque patterns. Mara Ellison's heart pounded as she scanned the chamber, calculating every angle, every exit. The network had been careful, meticulous, and now they had cornered her and Ryan in their lair. Ryan stepped beside her, his hand on his weapon, eyes darting from figure to figure. "They're not just random," he whispered. "Look at the way they're moving. Trained. Coordinated." Mara nodded. "And they want to intimidate us. That much is obvious." The tallest figure stepped forward, voice echoing in the stone chamber. "You've come far, Sheriff Ellison. Too far. You shouldn't have uncovered this." Mara raised her weapon steadily. "We know what you've been doing. Emily Shaw didn't have to die. And neither will anyone else, if you cooperate." A silence hung in the air, heavy and tense. Then a small, deliberate cough came from the back of the room. Mara turned sharply, flashlight cutting through the shadows, revealing a partially unmasked figure. A woman in her late 30s, hair pulled back tightly, eyes sharp and calculating. "She's one of them," Mara murmured. "One of the network members." The woman's eyes met Mara's. "Yes," she said coldly. "And now you're in the heart of Mill Creek's survival." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Survival? You're calling murder survival?" The woman tilted her head. "Not murder. Sacrifice. Preservation. The town thrives because we make difficult choices. Some lives are simply meant to serve a greater purpose." Mara felt bile rise in her throat. "You've been killing people under that excuse?" She didn't wait for an answer. Mara stepped forward, weapon raised. "We're shutting this down. Now." The tension snapped like a fraying rope. In an instant, the robed figures lunged forward, moving with terrifying precision. Mara fired a warning shot, the blast echoing off the chamber walls. Ryan followed, aiming at the approaching figures, trying to keep them at bay. Mara ducked behind a stone pillar as one of the figures lunged, knocking her to the ground. Her flashlight skidded across the floor, illuminating symbols etched into the stone. Symbols identical to those carved on the wooden figures they had discovered earlier. The symbols were everywhere, a map of control and fear. Someone had been orchestrating this for decades. Ryan tackled one of the attackers, forcing them to the ground. He ripped the mask off, revealing a face that sent chills down Mara's spine. A city council member, one of Mill Creek's most influential people. Mara's breath caught. So it's not just random citizens, it's the leadership of this town. Ryan nodded grimly. They've been running this behind the scenes. Amid the chaos, Mara noticed a narrow passageway behind the altar. Her instincts screamed that this was the next lead, the path to the mastermind. She grabbed Ryan's arm. "This way!" she shouted, diving into the passage. The corridor was tight, damp, and smelled of mildew. Their flashlights illuminated walls lined with carvings and symbols, marking the steps they took. Somewhere ahead, muffled voices spoke in hushed tones, planning, conspiring. As they advanced, Mara found a small pile of documents tucked into a crevice in the wall. She pulled them out carefully, rifling through pages filled with ledgers, names, and locations. The handwriting was meticulous, each entry corresponding to a victim or a potential target. Ryan leaned over her shoulder. "This is horrifying. They've been keeping track for years." Mara swallowed hard. "And it's not just Emily. They've been selecting their victims systematically, training their successors, and keeping the town under control through fear." Ryan's voice was tight. "We have to stop this, Mara. Now." They reached the end of the passage, emerging into another chamber, smaller, more intimate, lined with shelves filled with books, artifacts, and more wooden figures. At the center sat a figure behind a large desk, head bowed. Candles flickered across the walls, casting eerie shadows. Mara stepped forward cautiously. "This is it. This has to be the mastermind." The figure looked up slowly, and Mara's flashlight revealed a face both familiar and terrifying. Mayor Harold Vance. Ryan froze. "The mayor, he's the shepherd." Vance smiled faintly. "You've done well to make it this far. Few have. But you've underestimated the town, and more importantly, the tradition that keeps it alive." Mara's hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. "Tradition doesn't justify murder. You've been manipulating this town, killing people, and hiding behind the excuse of survival." Vance leaned back, hands clasped. "You don't understand. Mill Creek has always needed guidance. Every leader, every sacrifice, it's how we maintain order, prosperity, and peace. Ryan stepped forward, anger flaring. Peace built on blood isn't peace. It's tyranny. Vance's eyes flicked to the documents Mara had retrieved. Ah, you've seen my records. Impressive. Yes, I've been planning, selecting, controlling. And yes, Emily was a necessary test, a message to anyone who might challenge our system. Mara's stomach twisted. A message? She's dead because you wanted to prove a point. Vance shrugged. She was an outsider. She questioned, she observed. Someone had to remind her of her place. And the town needed the reminder. Ryan gritted his teeth. We're ending this tonight. Vance's smile widened. Perhaps. But you still haven't seen the full scope. He gestured to a hidden door behind the desk. Mara and Ryan exchanged a glance, tense but determined. Beyond the door was a descending staircase, carved into the bedrock beneath the mill. As they followed, the air grew colder, heavier, charged with the smell of wax and damp earth. At the base of the stairs, they found themselves in a subterranean chamber, a cathedral of darkness. Wooden figures covered the floor, each one carefully placed, each one representing a life taken or controlled. Symbols adorned every wall, some etched into stone, some painted in dark, dried blood. At the far end, a large, ceremonial altar stood, a grotesque monument to Mill Creek's hidden history. Vance stepped forward, arms raised. Behold, this is where it all comes together. The history, the hierarchy, the power. Mara's heart raced. You've been orchestrating murders for years. This is evidence for a lifetime of convictions. Vance chuckled. Convictions? You don't understand the town yet. Every influential figure you've confronted, every council member, every business owner, they're all part of this. They've willingly maintained the system. You can't just break it with a few arrests. Ryan's hands shook as he aimed at Vance. Then we dismantle the system, one by one, starting with you. Vance's voice dropped, almost gentle. You're brave but naive. Mill Creek needs control. Without it, chaos reigns. Mara's jaw tightened. We'll let the law decide, not your twisted philosophy. The moment stretched, taut with tension. Then, without warning, a hidden lever clicked beneath the altar. Traps sprung from the walls, blades swinging dangerously, pressure plates triggering hidden mechanisms. Mara dove to the side, dragging Ryan with her behind a pile of wooden figures. The air was filled with the sound of grinding stone and snapping metal. Ryan yelled, "They set this up. He planned for intruders." Mara nodded grimly. Of course he did. This has been in the making for decades. But he didn't count on us being relentless. Amid the chaos, Mara noticed a panel on the wall slightly ajar. Behind it, cables and old electrical wiring connected to a hidden control box. She realized quickly, this wasn't just ceremonial. The mill had been rigged as a lethal trap, designed to kill anyone who got too close. "Ryan," she shouted. "The traps, they're connected. We need to shut it down before anyone else dies." Ryan scrambled to help her, their hands working frantically over the controls. Sparks flew as they disconnected wires, disabling mechanisms one by one. Each success brought them closer to neutralizing the threat. Finally, the last trap clicked harmlessly into place. Silence fell over the chamber, broken only by their ragged breathing. Vance remained calm, seated behind the altar. "Impressive. You've survived the first trial." Mara leveled her weapon at him. "Your trials are over. You will answer for every life you've taken." Vance smiled faintly. "And what about the others?" Mara's eyes narrowed. "We'll find them. Every single one." The mayor's smile faltered slightly. For the first time, Mara sensed fear. Not just for himself, but for the empire he had built in darkness. Hours later, the first wave of arrests began. Mill Creek's hidden network was exposed. Council members, business owners, and even law enforcement officials implicated in the conspiracy were taken into custody. Evidence from the mill and Vance's documents painted a chilling portrait of decades-long manipulation, murder, and control. Mara and Ryan stood outside the mill as dawn broke, the town slowly waking to the news of the conspiracy. "This town," Mara said quietly, "has been living in shadows for far too long. But now, at least, they know the truth." Ryan exhaled, tension leaving his shoulders. "Emily didn't die in vain. We exposed them." Mara glanced at the mill, its dark silhouette against the morning sky. This is only the beginning. Mill Creek's secrets run deep, and I fear this isn't the last we've seen of those who hide in the shadows. The arrests had shaken Mill Creek to its core. By mid-morning, the streets were lined with police vehicles, journalists, and anxious residents trying to process what had been uncovered. Mara Ellison and Ryan Cole stood outside the town hall, watching as town officials were led away in handcuffs, their once pristine reputations shattered. "This is just the beginning," Mara said, her voice low. "Vance was the head, yes, but I guarantee he didn't act alone. This network is larger than we've seen so far." Ryan rubbed his eyes. "We've already seen council members, business owners, even law enforcement. How many more are out there?" Mara shook her head. "We don't know, but the longer we wait, the more people could be at risk." Their first stop was the police station's evidence room. Mara had requested all the files, documents, and digital records retrieved from the mill, Vance's mansion, and the homes of the arrested members. The room was quiet, save for the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint rustle of paper as she sorted through the evidence. Ryan leaned over a table piled high with files. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a ledger filled with names, dates, and codes. "These aren't just victims or targets. These are recruits, people groomed to maintain control in the town." Mara's eyes narrowed. So Vance wasn't just killing or threatening people. He was training them, conditioning them to continue his work. The circle doesn't end with him. It continues through these recruits. Ryan flipped to another set of documents. And these letters, some are warnings, some are instructions. He kept meticulous records of every move. Mara ran her fingers through her hair. "This goes deeper than we imagined. It's not just murder for control. It's systemic manipulation, embedded across the town's institutions." The next step was interviewing survivors and potential witnesses. Mara and Ryan divided their team, moving door to door through the town. Most residents were still in shock, some unwilling to talk, others fearful of retaliation. At the home of an elderly woman named Ruth Chambers, Mara found someone willing to speak. Ruth had worked at the mill decades earlier and had noticed strange patterns in the town's leadership. "They all met in secret," Ruth said, her voice trembling. "Council members, business leaders, they wore masks during ceremonies. I didn't understand it at first, thought it was some old tradition. But I knew it wasn't right. I tried to warn people. No one listened." Mara took notes quickly. "Do you know how long this has been going on?" Ruth shook her head. "Longer than anyone alive now, maybe 50 years. It's always been hidden. Always protected by those who benefit." Ryan's jaw tightened. So Emily wasn't the first outsider. She was just the latest to stumble into their system. Ruth nodded. "And they'll keep going unless someone stops them completely." Back at the station, Mara examined the recovered surveillance footage from Vance's mansion and the mill. Several clips showed masked figures meeting in the dead of night, discussing plans and coordinating attacks on anyone deemed a threat. One sequence caught Mara's attention. A meeting in the woods outside town, with a hooded figure delivering envelopes similar to those Emily received. "This is a distribution network," Mara said. "They've been actively recruiting and controlling members beyond the town itself. Mill Creek is just the center." Ryan frowned, meaning the network could extend into neighboring counties, maybe even statewide. Mara's mind raced. "Exactly. And if they're that organized, stopping Vance alone won't dismantle the system. We have to trace every connection, every recruit, every accomplice." That evening, Mara and Ryan met with Detective Claire Donovan from the state police. Claire had been tracking a series of unsolved disappearances in the region that might be linked to Mill Creek. "Some of these disappearances align perfectly with Vance's records," Claire said, spreading out maps and timelines on the conference table. "Young journalists, local activists, anyone who questioned authority. And the common thread leads back to Mill Creek." Mara leaned over the table, scanning the maps. "So Vance's influence stretches beyond this town. We're looking at a network designed to control information and maintain fear region-wide." Claire nodded. "And it's clever. The victims' families were left in the dark, threats disguised as accidents or disappearances. Most cases went cold immediately." Ryan's eyes darkened. "So the mastermind wasn't just the mayor. This network has layers, and Vance is just the top we've uncovered." Mara's lips pressed into a thin line. "We need to expose every layer, or the cycle continues." This isn't just a town problem. It's an entire system of corruption and terror. The following day, Mara returned to Emily Shaw's apartment with Ryan. She carefully re-examined the photographs and notes Emily had left behind. Among the images of the riverbank, mill, and town streets, Mara discovered a pattern she had missed before. Certain buildings were marked repeatedly, some with discrete symbols only visible up close. "These are locations of interest," Mara murmured. Vance and his network had eyes everywhere, cafes, libraries, even city offices. Emily was documenting them all, piece by piece. Ryan's voice was quiet, so she was trying to map the network herself. "That's why she became a target." Mara nodded. "And her notes may be the key to unraveling the entire system. If we can follow her trail, we can identify more members before they act again." By nightfall, Mara had compiled a new list of suspects, individuals whose names appeared repeatedly in Emily's notes and Vance's records. Each person was influential in the town: business owners, clergy, even a high school principal. The realization hit hard. The network wasn't just secretive, it had penetrated Mill Creek's very foundation. Ryan rubbed his temples. "This is bigger than we thought. How many people in this town are part of it, Mara?" Mara's voice was steady, but her eyes were sharp. "Enough to make anyone hesitate before acting. But if we don't dismantle it now, more people will die. Emily was only the beginning. There will be others." They split up the next morning to interview some of the lesser-known individuals in the network, people who had maintained secrecy but might have cracks in their loyalty. Many were nervous, some denying everything, others subtly threatening the investigators to back off. One interview, in particular, revealed a chilling piece of information. A former mill worker, now elderly, admitted that he had been coerced into participating in rituals designed to intimidate and control. "They didn't care about the law," he said, shaking. "They wanted fear, obedience. And if you didn't follow, you disappeared." Emily, she was careless, asking questions she shouldn't have. Mara noted it meticulously. "So it's not just murder, it's a system of psychological control, maintained over decades." Ryan's face darkened. "And the mayor, Vance, is only the tip of the iceberg. There are more people ready to take his place if he falls." Mara spent the night at the station, poring over every piece of evidence: notes, photos, ledgers, and surveillance footage. She traced every connection she could find, mapping out the network like a web. The deeper she went, the more she realized the chilling scope of the operation. Each thread led to another, a web of corruption, manipulation, and intimidation that extended beyond Mill Creek. Emily Shaw's death wasn't just a murder. It was a message, a demonstration of the network's reach and influence. As she stared at the maps and files spread across the table, Mara's phone buzzed. A text appeared on her screen from an unknown number. "You're too close. Stop now, or you'll be next." The circle. Her blood ran cold. Ryan, standing beside her, read the message over her shoulder. "They're watching us even here." Mara's jaw tightened. "Yes, and that means every move we make has to be careful. But we don't stop now. We follow the threads, and we expose every single one." The next morning, the investigation escalated. Mara and Ryan coordinated with state police, planning simultaneous raids on suspected network members. Each target was carefully chosen, based on Emily's notes and Vance's meticulous records. By midday, arrests were made: a local priest implicated in the rituals, a prominent banker involved in intimidation, and even a school principal who had been manipulating students to maintain loyalty to the network. Each arrest revealed more evidence: ledgers, letters, photographs, and detailed accounts of threats and coercion. Mara realized that the mastermind had built an empire of fear in plain sight, one that relied on secrecy, obedience, and intimidation. And the deeper she delved, the more she understood that Mill Creek was only the center of a far-reaching network, a system that could spread to neighboring towns if not fully dismantled. By evening, Mara and Ryan stood atop a small hill overlooking Mill Creek. The town seemed calm, almost peaceful, but they both knew better. Beneath the quiet streets and quaint buildings, secrets festered. Ryan broke the silence. "Do you think we can stop it all?" Mara looked at the town, the mill silhouetted against the setting sun. "We have to try. Emily's death won't be in vain. And the network, it ends here, or at least we start cutting it down piece by piece." Ryan nodded. "Then let's finish this." As the sun dipped below the horizon, shadows stretched long across Mill Creek. Mara knew that the next steps would be the most dangerous yet. The mastermind was still out there, watching, waiting, planning, and the town's darkest secrets were far from fully exposed. The town of Mill Creek was quiet that morning, almost unnervingly so. Streets that had been filled with police vehicles, flashing lights, and media crews during the previous raids were now eerily empty. It was as if the town itself were holding its breath, waiting for the next strike. Mara Ellison and Ryan Cole drove slowly through the streets, their eyes scanning for any unusual activity. Every storefront, every alley, every shadow held potential danger. "We've exposed most of the network we know about," Ryan said quietly, breaking the silence. "But something feels off. Vance may be behind it all, but I have this gut feeling there are more players we haven't identified yet." Mara nodded, her jaw tight. "You're right. Vance built layers of protection for a reason. He has allies we haven't seen, and they're still moving in the shadows. We need to dig deeper into his connections." Back at the station, Mara reviewed the evidence recovered from Vance's mansion and the mill. The ledger detailing the network's operations was massive. Names, dates, encrypted messages, and lists of targets carefully organized. Emily Shaw's notes added another layer of clarity, showing the meticulous way Vance's web had been constructed. Ryan leaned over her shoulder, pointing to a set of files. "Look at this. These aren't just Mill Creek residents, they're officials in neighboring towns. Judges, council members, even law enforcement officers. Vance's influence extends far beyond this town." Mara's eyes narrowed. "So it's a regional operation. He's been using Mill Creek as a base to control the surrounding counties. That explains the pattern of disappearances and the unsolved cases." Ryan frowned. "And if he's this well connected, he has someone feeding him information inside our investigation. Someone we trust." Mara stiffened. "That's what worries me. We've been careful, but if there's a mole, we could be walking straight into their hands." To identify potential internal threats, Mara initiated a thorough review of all personnel involved in the investigation. Officers, detectives, and even administrative staff were scrutinized for any links to Vance or his network. One name, however, stood out, a liaison from the state police, Detective Marcus Harlan, who had been instrumental in coordinating raids and surveillance. Ryan's eyes widened as he read the file. "Marcus? He's been with us the entire time. You think he's compromised?" Mara didn't answer immediately. She had learned the hard way that gut instincts were often the first clue in unraveling a network like Vance's. "We need proof before we act. Watch him closely. Everything he does from now on could be a test." That evening, Mara and Ryan set up surveillance at the local cafe, a hub that Vance's network often used to communicate discreetly. They observed Marcus Harlan sitting at a corner table, ostensibly reviewing case files. But as the night progressed, Mara noticed subtle signs. Marcus signaling with hand gestures, receiving a coded message on his phone, and speaking in hushed tones to a man who entered briefly and left. "He's definitely in contact with someone," Mara whispered. "And it's someone involved in the network." Ryan nodded. "We need to confront him, but carefully. If he suspects we know, he could disappear or take lethal action." Meanwhile, the town council, now in disarray after the previous arrests, began attempting to cover up involvement in the network. Certain members who had escaped initial scrutiny were using influence to remove incriminating evidence, manipulate witnesses, and pressure locals into silence. Mara realized that time was critical. If we don't act fast, Vance's remnants will regroup and more people will die. Ryan clenched his fists. "Then let's stop talking and start acting. We need to flush out every last member before they realize they're exposed." The following morning, Mara and Ryan arranged a discreet meeting with Marcus Harlan at a secluded parking lot outside town. The detective arrived on time, his expression calm but guarded. "Marcus," Mara began, "we need to talk about the network." "The circle?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You mean the group you've been dismantling? I don't see how I fit into this conversation." Ryan's voice was steady but firm. "We've observed your activities, your communications. You've been sending messages, signaling people connected to Vance." Marcus laughed softly. "You're paranoid. I'm helping this investigation, just like you." Mara stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "We have evidence. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Tell us what you know. Who are you working with? For a moment, Marcus was silent, his eyes flicking to the woods behind the parking lot, as if calculating an escape. Then he smiled, cold and cruel. You think you've been leading this investigation? You've been herded, manipulated. Every move you've made has been predictable, and every piece of evidence you've collected is exactly what I wanted you to find. Ryan's hand went to his weapon. You son of a... Mara stopped him. Not yet. Let's hear him out. Marcus leaned back against his car, voice calm. Vance didn't act alone, and neither do I. The circle is larger than you know. We've been watching you, learning from you. Every raid, every arrest, every lead, it's all part of a bigger plan. And Emily Shaw, she was never meant to survive. Mara felt a chill run down her spine. You killed her. You threatened everyone in town. And now you're telling me it's bigger than Mill Creek? Marcus shrugged. Mill Creek is only the center. The network stretches across counties, even states. Vance's arrest is just a speed bump. The circle has contingency plans, allies, and replacements ready. You think you've won, but the game is far from over. With that, Marcus pulled a small device from his pocket and pressed a button. Mara and Ryan had no time to react as a car screeched around the corner, nearly hitting them. Marcus vanished into the vehicle, disappearing into the dark morning streets. Ryan cursed. He's gone. How do we stop someone like that? Mara's expression was resolute. We follow every lead, every connection. The network may be larger than Mill Creek, but it isn't untouchable. We'll find him, and when we do, we make sure there's nowhere left for them to hide. The betrayal by Marcus Harlan forced Mara to rethink their strategy. The investigation could no longer rely solely on local forces. They needed state and federal coordination to dismantle the network entirely. She called in additional resources, including cybercrime units and forensic accountants, to trace the network's financial and digital footprints. As the new investigation began, Mara revisited Emily Shaw's notes, this time with heightened urgency. Emily had meticulously documented contacts, symbols, and patterns that indicated how the network communicated. Mara realized that decoding these patterns could reveal additional members and potential future targets. Ryan worked tirelessly, cross-referencing Emily's notes with the network's financial transactions and previous disappearances. Look at this, he said one evening, pointing to a series of coded messages hidden in Emily's photographs. These aren't just markers, they're instructions coordinating who's in and who's out. We can use this to predict their next move. Mara nodded, determination etched on her face. Then we don't wait. We move before they realize we've cracked the code. Over the next week, coordinated raids began across Mill Creek and surrounding counties. The arrests revealed new layers of the network, local business owners involved in laundering money, community leaders complicit in covering up disappearances, and even clergy who had facilitated the network's rituals and indoctrination. Each arrest brought shocking revelations. Survivors came forward, telling stories of intimidation, coercion, and psychological manipulation. Some had been forced into participating, while others had witnessed the network's brutality firsthand. Mara and Ryan documented everything, aware that each piece of evidence was critical for dismantling the network entirely. But even as the arrests piled up, they knew that the mastermind, Vance's inner circle, and rogue members like Marcus Harlan were still active, and they were plotting their next move. One night, Mara received an anonymous message on her secure line. The text was simple, chilling, and unmistakable. You're close. Too close. Some secrets in Mill Creek are better left buried. The circle. She read the message aloud to Ryan. They're watching our every move. They know we're coming for them. Ryan's jaw tightened. Then we don't stop. We've come too far to back down now. Whoever they are, wherever they hide, we find them. And we make sure they pay for everything. Mara stared out the window at the quiet town below. Mill Creek streets were calm, but she knew better. Beneath the surface, the network still thrived, waiting, plotting, and ready to strike back. This isn't over, Mara whispered, more to herself than to Ryan. Not by a long shot. By the end of the week, Mara had identified several high-priority targets. Regional leaders, longtime network members, and hidden operatives who had been quietly guiding the circle's operations. Each new discovery revealed the extent of the conspiracy, the psychological manipulation, and the ruthless efficiency with which the network operated. For Mara, The investigation had become personal. Emily Shaw's death, the betrayal of Marcus Harlan, and the shocking complicity of the town's leadership had left a mark. But she knew that stopping the circle would require courage, cunning, and relentless pursuit, traits she and Ryan possessed in equal measure. And somewhere in the shadows, the mastermind was watching, planning, and waiting for the next opportunity to strike. The early morning fog clung to Mill Creek like a shroud, muffling sounds and hiding movement. Mara Ellison and Ryan Cole drove slowly through the town, their eyes scanning every alley, every side street. After the betrayal by Marcus Harlan and the exposure of several network members, Mara knew the circle had gone quiet. But that quiet meant danger. "They're regrouping," Mara said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "After every raid, the network reorganizes, evaluates, and strikes back. We can't let them gain a foothold again." Ryan nodded, tension in his jaw. "And Marcus Harlan? He's still out there. The fact that he got away means he's active and dangerous. He knows our tactics." Mara's eyes were cold. "Then we hit him before he hits us, or someone else dies." The first lead came from Emily Shaw's meticulous notes. Hidden among her photographs and symbols were references to a property on the outskirts of Mill Creek, long abandoned but frequently visited by mysterious figures. Mara and Ryan arrived at the site, a dilapidated farmhouse, its windows boarded and roof sagging. "Looks abandoned," Ryan said, crouching beside a broken gate. "But we both know better." Mara scanned the perimeter. "Keep your eyes open. If they're using this place, it's probably a hub for coordination or storage." The farmhouse smelled of mildew and decay. Inside, dust covered everything, and cobwebs hung from the rafters. But Mara's flashlight revealed traces of recent activity: discarded food wrappers, cigarette butts, and faint footprints in the dirt floor. "They've been here," Mara whispered. "And recently." Ryan pointed toward the basement door, partially hidden beneath a threadbare rug. "That's our next stop." The basement was cramped, with low ceilings and stone walls. Wooden crates lined the corners, marked with the same triangular symbols Mara had seen in Emily's notes. Several crates contained letters, photographs, and coded messages, the network's communication archive. Mara's heart raced. This is it. The messages, the instructions, everything we need to understand how they operate outside Mill Creek. Ryan carefully opened one crate, revealing envelopes addressed to towns and cities across the state. Mara picked up a letter, noting the precision of the handwriting and the cryptic symbols. "They're coordinating more than just local influence," Mara murmured. "They're building a network that spans counties. The circle isn't just Mill Creek, it's regional." A sudden noise upstairs froze them both. Footsteps, deliberate and heavy, echoed through the house. Mara raised her weapon. "They know we're here. Get ready." Ryan nodded, checking his own firearm. The footsteps grew closer, then stopped. Silence. Then a door creaked open, and Marcus Harlan emerged, his familiar smirk unmistakable. "Detectives," he said, hands raised slightly, mockingly innocent. "I was wondering when you'd find me." Mara's voice was icy. "Enough games, Marcus. This ends now. Tell us everything about the circle, or we take you in and make sure you rot in prison." Marcus chuckled, moving closer. "You think you've uncovered the whole network? You haven't even scratched the surface." Vance was careful, but the circle is larger than even he knew. "And yes, I'm part of it, but not the head. I'm just a facilitator." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Facilitator or not, you're done. Your allies are being arrested, your operations exposed. You don't have anywhere left to run." Marcus's eyes gleamed. "Ah, but you're still in the dark, aren't you? The circle has contingencies. People you've never suspected, placed in positions of power. And when the time is right, they'll strike." Before Mara could respond, Marcus lunged toward a hidden panel in the wall. Ryan reacted instinctively, tackling him to the ground. The two struggled, gunfire echoing off the stone walls as Marcus fought with brutal strength. Mara quickly moved to block another hidden door, preventing potential reinforcements. The fight was chaotic, violent, and relentless. Marcus was cunning, using his knowledge of the house and tunnels to his advantage, but Mara and Ryan's training and determination kept them in control. Finally, Ryan landed a decisive blow, and Marcus slumped, gasping. Mara secured him with zip ties, her mind racing. "He won't talk easily, but we'll get the truth." Interrogating Marcus revealed shocking details. The Circle had not only been controlling Mill Creek, but had also extended its influence through carefully placed operatives in neighboring towns. Judges, business leaders, and law enforcement officers had been silently complicit, maintaining the network's power and protecting its secrets. "They've been planning something big," Marcus admitted reluctantly. Vance's arrest disrupted the operation, but contingency plans were activated. Certain members were told to lie low, wait, and strike when the right moment came. The Circle has always been patient, and it's ruthless. Mara's mind raced. And the next target? Marcus hesitated, fear flickering in his eyes. "You won't see it coming. The Circle has eyes everywhere. You think Mill Creek is the epicenter, but there are plans far beyond this town. If you expose us too soon, it could trigger chaos." Ryan's voice was sharp. "Then we act now before more people die. Whatever they're planning, we stop it." With Marcus secured, Mara and Ryan returned to the station, coordinating with state and federal authorities. The operation expanded rapidly, targeting known Circle members and suspected collaborators. Each raid revealed more, uncovering hidden weapons caches, communication hubs, and additional records detailing the network's activities. One discovery shocked Mara deeply: a hidden ledger listing people in positions of trust within the investigation itself. Certain detectives, administrative staff, and informants had been feeding information to the Circle. The betrayal was widespread, and it shook the team's confidence. Mara knew they had to proceed carefully. "We can't trust anyone outside this room," she told Ryan. "Not yet. Every move has to be calculated. One slip, and the network could disappear before we get the evidence we need." Over the next few days, several key arrests were made. Regional leaders were taken into custody, communications disrupted, and the Circle's reach began to unravel. However, Mara realized that the mastermind's plan extended far beyond the immediate arrests. Emily Shaw's death had been a warning, but Marcus's revelations hinted at a larger scheme, a calculated effort to maintain control and manipulate fear across multiple towns. Mara reviewed the evidence with Ryan late one night. Marcus said the Circle has contingencies. That means even if we dismantle one branch, others can continue their operations. The mastermind anticipated this. Ryan rubbed his temples. "So we're fighting not just a network, but an entire system. And the mastermind? He or she is always one step ahead." Mara's eyes hardened. "Then we become 2 steps ahead. Every document, every note, every symbol from Emily's research and the mill gives us leverage. We follow the threads, corner them, and dismantle the Circle completely." That night, Mara received a tip from an anonymous source, another survivor from the mill's secret chambers. The person revealed the location of a remote warehouse outside Mill Creek, reportedly used for training new recruits and storing incriminating evidence. Mara and Ryan knew this was their next critical step. Arriving at the warehouse under the cover of darkness, they found the building heavily guarded, more sophisticated than anything they had seen before. Surveillance cameras, motion sensors, and armed guards indicated that the Circle had anticipated their approach. Mara whispered to Ryan, "This is it. The next layer of the Circle. If we succeed here, we cut off a major branch of their operations. But if we fail, more people will die." Ryan nodded, checking his weapon. "Let's move." The raid was tense and calculated. Mara and Ryan coordinated with federal agents to breach the warehouse. Inside, they discovered dozens of recruits, young men and women indoctrinated into the Circle, many of them terrified but willing to follow orders out of fear. Alongside them were documents detailing the Circle's regional operations, encrypted messages, and lists of targets spanning several counties. Mara realized that the Circle's influence extended far beyond Mill Creek. The network's grip on the region was strong, and dismantling it would require not only arrests but also careful rehabilitation of indoctrinated members and the exposure of hidden leaders. Among the seized documents, Mara found something chilling, a folder labeled "The Next Phase." Opening it revealed plans that indicated the mastermind's ultimate goal, an orchestrated series of events designed to consolidate power, eliminate opposition, and expand the Circle's reach across the state. As dawn approached, Mara and Ryan stood outside the warehouse, exhausted but determined. The raid had been a success, but the discovery of the mastermind's ultimate plan weighed heavily on their minds. Ryan broke the silence. This is bigger than Mill Creek. We've only scratched the surface. If the circle follows this plan, it could destabilize the entire region. Mara's jaw tightened. Then we make sure they don't get the chance. We follow every lead, interrogate every captured member, and uncover every secret. Emily Shaw's work wasn't in vain. We finish it. Ryan looked at her, determination mirrored in his eyes. Then let's do it. No mistakes. No mercy. Mara nodded. The circle had tightened its grip, but they had found the threads. And now it was time to pull them apart, thread by thread, until the mastermind and every hidden ally were exposed. The rain had finally stopped. But the silence that followed felt heavier than the storm itself. Detective Rowan Hale stood outside the abandoned Blackridge Communications facility, staring at the rusted metal gates as fog curled around her boots. The building sat at the far edge of town, hidden behind rows of skeletal radio towers that rose into the sky like rusted needles. Officially, the facility had been shut down 12 years ago after budget cuts and equipment failures. Unofficially, it had remained untouched because everyone in Blackridge whispered about it the same way they whispered about the disappearances. No one wanted to disturb it, but Rowan had no choice. Behind her, Officer Eli Mercer stepped out of the cruiser carrying 2 flashlights and a crowbar. "You sure this is where the recordings originated?" he asked. Rowan nodded, gripping the folder tucked beneath her arm. The audio files Mara found had metadata. They were transmitted through a relay frequency linked to this station. Eli exhaled slowly. So whoever ran the recordings used this place as a broadcast hub. Exactly. The chain was tightening. The symbols found in victim journals, the coded entries, the hypnotic voice recordings, the corrupted therapy logs, all of it now pointed toward Blackridge Communications. Rowan pushed open the gate. It screamed as it swung inward. Inside the forgotten station, dust coated every surface like a preserved memory. The building smelled like mold and stale paper. Old cables dangled from ceilings. Computer terminals sat frozen in time, their CRT monitors cracked and yellowed with age. Rowan moved cautiously through the main corridor, her flashlight beams slicing through drifting dust particles. "Power's completely dead," Eli muttered, tapping one of the terminals. Rowan crouched beside a faded sign near the reception desk. Blackridge Signal Archive, authorized personnel only. Archive. The word made her pulse quicken. "Help me find the basement access," she said. The descent. They located the stairwell behind a locked maintenance door. Eli forced it open with the crowbar, revealing concrete steps descending into darkness. Cold air rushed upward. Rowan's instincts screamed. "Stay alert," she whispered. Their footsteps echoed as they descended. The basement level was larger than expected, lined with rows of metal shelving, each stacked with labeled storage boxes and audio reels. Thousands of them. Eli let out a stunned breath. "This isn't just a station, it's a vault." Rowan scanned the labels. Dates. Case numbers. Initials. Her stomach dropped. "Eli," she whispered. "These aren't broadcasting archives." He turned, reading the nearest box. His face paled. The label read, "Subject Series, BR Protocol." The Blackridge Protocol. Rowan opened the first box. Inside were neatly arranged cassette tapes, each labeled with victim names. Names she recognized. Missing persons. Closed cold cases. Unsolved disappearances. And beneath the tapes sat printed transcripts. Rowan flipped through one, her heart pounding. Transcript excerpt. Subject, Laura Penn. Session 14. Voice A. Tell me what you see when you close your eyes. Subject. The house, the white hallway, the red symbol. Voice A. Good. The house keeps you safe. Subject. I don't feel safe. Voice A. You will. Soon you won't feel anything at all. Rowan's hands trembled. They were conditioning them, she whispered. Eli swallowed hard. For what? Rowan didn't answer. Because she wasn't sure she wanted to know. The master index. At the far end of the basement stood a locked filing cabinet marked with a faded symbol. The same symbol carved into Mara's photographs. The same one found in victims' journals. The same one scratched into abandoned properties. Rowan knelt, examining the lock. Eli handed her the crowbar. One sharp strike. The lock snapped. Inside were dozens of binders organized alphabetically. Rowan pulled the first one labeled BR Subject Management. She opened it and froze. The network. Each binder contained profiles, photos, psychological evaluations, daily monitoring logs, and at the top of every profile sat a classification stamp. Active, dormant, terminated. Eli leaned over her shoulder, scanning pages rapidly. These are survivors. Rowan nodded slowly. Not just survivors, she said quietly. Assets. They flipped deeper into the binder. The pages documented individuals who had undergone long-term psychological manipulation through therapy, radio frequencies, and controlled environments. Some had been released back into society. Others had disappeared permanently, and every file listed a handler, the name they feared. Rowan's breath caught as she reached the handler index. One name appeared repeatedly, over dozens of cases, over 2 decades. Dr. Vincent Holbrook. Rowan's chest tightened. She remembered him, a renowned trauma psychiatrist, consultant for multiple missing persons investigations, public speaker on grief counseling. He had even testified in several cases Rowan had worked early in her career. He was helping families, Eli said, stunned. Rowan shook her head slowly. No, she whispered. He was studying them, the secondary handlers. But Holbrook hadn't worked alone. Rowan turned the page. The list expanded into coded identifiers. Handler R7, Handler M12, Handler K4, a Handler Archive Custodian, each code linked to specific subjects. Each handler oversaw monitoring and reinforcement sessions. Rowan's pulse roared in her ears. This wasn't one predator. It was an organized system. The recording room. At the far corner of the basement sat a steel door labeled Audio Calibration Chamber. Rowan approached cautiously. The handle was unlocked. Inside, the room was padded with soundproof panels. Microphones hung from adjustable arms. A central chair faced a recording console still lined with analog equipment. And on the console sat a tape recorder. Dust-free. Rowan pressed play. Static crackled. Then a calm, measured voice filled the chamber. Memory is fragile, but fear is permanent. Rowan froze. She recognized the voice immediately. Dr. Vincent Holbrook. Each subject must associate safety with obedience, pain with resistance. Once the link is complete, the subject becomes compliant, even when unsupervised. Rowan's breath grew shallow. This is Phase 3 of the Blackridge Protocol. Eli turned toward her, horrified. What the hell is Phase 3? The recording answered. Release the subject back into society. Monitor behavioral drift. When the symbol appears in their environment, compliance triggers will activate. Static hissed. Then another sentence whispered through the speakers. Subjects rarely remember, but they always return. The psychological trap. Rowan shut off the recorder, her hand shaking. They weren't just abducting victims, she said quietly. They were creating psychological sleeper agents. Eli ran a hand over his face. For what purpose? Rowan stared at the rows of tapes. Control. Study. Power. Maybe all of it. The hidden map. Eli discovered a large corkboard pinned behind the recording console. Strings connected dozens of photographs across Blackridge. Homes. Schools. Therapy centers. Police stations. And Rowan's stomach dropped when she saw her own precinct circled in red thread. They were watching the investigators too, Eli whispered. Rowan stepped closer. One final string connected to a single location circled in black marker. The White House, private property. Rowan's blood ran cold. She recognized it instantly. The abandoned residence Mara had photographed months ago. The same one where the first victim had reportedly vanished decades earlier. Mara's secret. Rowan's phone buzzed suddenly. It was Mara. Her voice trembled when Rowan answered. I found something, Mara said. My mother kept a storage unit. I broke in tonight. Rowan's pulse spiked. What did you find? Mara inhaled shakily. Photographs, therapy logs, and letters addressed to Dr. Holbrook. Rowan closed her eyes. Mara, your mother wasn't just a victim. Silence filled the line. I know, Mara whispered. She was working for them before she tried to expose them. The confession files. Back in the basement, Rowan located a final sealed crate labeled Confidential, handler termination records. She opened it carefully. Inside were reports documenting handlers who had been removed from the program. Reasons varied. Emotional instability, a loss of loyalty, risk of exposure. Each termination ended with one chilling phrase. Subject reassigned to archive custodian. Rowan's throat tightened. Archive custodian, she repeated. Eli frowned. Who is that? Rowan turned to the final document in the crate. It contained a black and white photograph. The face was partially obscured by shadows, but Rowan recognized the silhouette, the posture, the long coat, the figure she had glimpsed in surveillance footage near multiple crime scenes. The living overseer. Rowan whispered the words she had feared since the investigation began. Holbrook wasn't the leader. Eli stared at her. Then who was? Rowan held up the photograph. The archive custodian. The final discovery. As they prepared to leave, Rowan noticed a sealed envelope taped beneath the recording console. It was addressed in neat handwriting. For Investigator Hale, when you finally listen. Her breath caught. Slowly, she opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. You were always meant to find us. Your father nearly did. His curiosity made him dangerous. Your determination makes you inevitable. Rowan's heart slammed against her ribs. You believe this is about saving victims, but Blackridge is built on memory, and memory belongs to those who control it. The final line chilled her completely. You are closer to the truth than any investigator before you, and soon you will understand why some stories must never end. Rowan lowered the letter, her hands trembling. Eli watched her carefully. What does it mean? Rowan stared into the darkened recording chamber. It means, she whispered, this isn't over. The chapter closes. As they exited the station, dawn began breaking over Blackridge. The fog was lifting, but Rowan knew the clarity it revealed would only expose deeper darkness. Behind them, the archive remained filled with thousands of voices, whispers trapped in magnetic tape, memories twisted into weapons. And somewhere out there, the archive custodian was still watching, still listening, still waiting. The air in Mill Creek was thick with tension, a tangible heaviness that pressed against Mara Ellison and Rowan Hale as they walked the quiet streets. The raids, arrests, and exposure of the circle had rattled the town, but a deeper unease lingered. Survivors whispered of shadows, of symbols that appeared in their homes, of nightmares that felt less like dreams and more like commands. Mara adjusted the strap of her satchel, glancing at the folder filled with Emily Shaw's notes and files she had recovered from the archives. Each document was a map leading to the circle's deeper secrets, each symbol a breadcrumb toward the ultimate mastermind, the archive custodian. Rowan, Mara said, her voice low, we can't just rely on raids anymore. The archive custodian isn't just hiding, he's orchestrating events from the shadows. We need someone who can give us insight into the network's operations, someone who survived the conditioning and lived to tell the truth. Rowan's gaze was steady, but her hands were tight around her coat collar. I've been thinking the same thing, but survivors have been scared, some too broken to speak. If we push too hard, we risk losing them, or worse, triggering their programming. Mara nodded grimly. We need to be careful but deliberate. We can't let fear dictate our actions. Not now. The resurfaced witness. Their first lead came from an unexpected source. A young woman, Lila Tanner, had contacted the station anonymously after hearing about the raids. Lila had disappeared from Mill Creek nearly a decade earlier and was believed to be one of the Circle's lost subjects. Rowan and Mara arranged a discreet meeting in a secluded part of the town library. Lila appeared pale, guarded, and hesitant, clutching a worn journal close to her chest. Her eyes flicked nervously to every shadow. You're the investigators? She whispered. I don't know if I can help. They watch even the people who try to stop them. Mara stepped forward gently. Lila, we're here to protect you. We want the truth. Whatever you can tell us could save lives. Lila nodded, taking a shaky breath. I was taken when I was 16. The Circle calls it the integration phase. They didn't just hold us. They rewired our memories. Every time I try to recall something, I get flashes. Commands. Warnings. I thought I was imagining it, until I saw the symbols again. I knew they were real. Rowan exchanged a look with Mara. Those symbols, they're triggers. They were used to condition you. Lila's hands trembled. Yes. And now, I see them everywhere. I don't know who to trust. Mara laid a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You can trust us, but we need everything you remember. Every detail, every interaction, every person you saw in the program. It's how we'll find the archive custodian. Piecing together the archive. Back at the station, Mara and Rowan pored over Lila's journal. It contained meticulous notes, names, locations, sequences of events, and cryptic symbols. Many entries mirrored the recordings and files found in the Blackridge Communications facility. This confirms it, Rowan said, tracing lines on the map. The archive custodian's influence isn't just local. These operatives, these handlers, they're everywhere, embedded in towns across the region. Mara frowned. And they're still following the same protocols. Phase 3 activation of conditioned subjects. Lila mentioned flashes. Other survivors have reported similar triggers. They could be forced to act without realizing it. Rowan's eyes darkened. We have to warn them. But how do you warn someone who doesn't know they're at risk? Mara tapped her fingers on the desk, thinking rapidly. We find the nodes first, the operatives still active. We dismantle them systematically. Then we can extract and deprogram the survivors. A fractured ally. As the investigation continued, Mara received disturbing news. A trusted ally within the state police, Detective Peter Lang, had been attacked in his home. He survived, but barely, and he refused to speak at first, terrified of retaliation. Rowan visited him in the hospital. His apartment had been ransacked, files stolen, and the message left behind was unmistakable. A warning from the archive custodian. They're everywhere, Peter muttered, bandages on his arms. I didn't see them coming. Someone knew I was investigating the survivors, and they almost got me. Mara sat beside him, her hands steady. Peter, who knew? Was it someone local, or higher up? Peter shook his head, fear in his eyes. I don't know. I think it's bigger than anyone realizes. They're organized, patient, and they watch everyone. Rowan exhaled slowly. Then we have to move faster than they anticipate. No mistakes, Mara. If the archive custodian is this meticulous, one slip could cost more lives. Triggers in the wild. The next phase of the investigation revealed another chilling layer. Several survivors began experiencing sudden memory flashes and compulsions. Lila reported seeing symbols in random places, on bus stops, store walls, even graffiti on school property. Each time, her mind forced her to replay the conditioning sessions, triggering panic, fear, and involuntary actions. Mara realized this was the circle's psychological grip at work. They didn't just control us, they left a system behind. Phase 3 is still active, even without the main handlers. Rowan added, and if these triggers are activating in multiple survivors, it means the archive custodian's influence is alive. He's watching, orchestrating, waiting for us to make a mistake. Mara's voice hardened. Then we have to become proactive. Track the triggers, predict the next moves, and isolate the archive custodian before he can manipulate anyone else. The first major confrontation. The breakthrough came from a coded sequence in Lila's journal. It led Mara and Rowan to a remote cabin in the woods, an operational outpost for the Circle's regional network. Inside, they found 3 active operatives, preparing to transmit instructions to dormant subjects. The encounter was tense. The operatives were trained, ready for violence, and highly skilled in psychological manipulation. A firefight erupted, chaotic and relentless, echoing through the forest. Mara and Rowan were forced to improvise, using the terrain to their advantage, taking cover behind trees and boulders. By the end of the confrontation, 2 operatives were apprehended, 1 neutralized. The surviving operative, under questioning, revealed the Circle's next intended move. A mass activation of conditioned subjects across multiple counties, designed to create chaos and divert attention while the archive custodian expanded his reach. Mara felt her stomach drop. They're planning coordinated attacks. This isn't just about Mill Creek anymore. It's regional, maybe even statewide. Rowan clenched her fists. Then we have no time to waste. Every move we make now has to be precise. Every lead followed. Personal connections revealed. Late that night, Mara returned to her apartment to sift through Emily's files and her mother's hidden documents. One folder caught her attention, A personal letter addressed to Mara's mother from Dr. Holbrook. The letter detailed the psychological protocols, but also contained a chilling note. Your daughter will inherit the knowledge. She is the key to unraveling the circle. Protect her, and she will finish what you started. Fail, and the network continues. Mara's hands trembled. My mother, she wasn't just a victim or a whistleblower. She designed part of the system to ensure it could be undone, if someone strong enough found it. Rowan, standing behind her, placed a reassuring hand on Mara's shoulder. Then we finish it. Together. We expose the archive custodian, dismantle the network, and save anyone left under their control. Closing the chapter. As dawn broke over Mill Creek, the town seemed calm, deceptively so. Mara and Rowan knew better. Shadows still lurked, survivors were still at risk, and the archive custodian was still out there, orchestrating, observing, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Mara stared out the window at the quiet streets. Her reflection was ghostly in the glass. This isn't over, she whispered, almost to herself. But soon we'll bring the circle into the light. Rowan nodded silently beside her, aware that the final confrontation was drawing near. The pieces were coming together. The archive custodian's network was unraveling, but the final battle, both psychological and physical, was yet to come. And when it did, nothing in Mill Creek, or the surrounding counties, would ever be the same. The sky above Mill Creek was gray, heavy with clouds that seemed to press down upon the town. The tension Mara Ellison felt was nearly physical, coiling in her stomach as she and Rowan Hale drove toward the location that Lila Tanner had marked. The archive custodian's last known operational base. It was a nondescript estate on the outskirts of the neighboring county. A sprawling white mansion secluded by woods, with tall iron gates and surveillance cameras perched at every corner. The mansion had been abandoned in appearance, but every detail Mara and Rowan had discovered in the Blackridge archives suggested otherwise. It was alive with activity. The Circle's final command center. This is it, Rowan said quietly, gripping her flashlight. Everything comes down to this house. Mara nodded, her jaw set. We finally see the person responsible for everything. The masterminds, the conditioning, the disappearances. No more shadows. No more waiting. Behind them, a tactical team assembled, ready to breach the property. Mara looked at Rowan and the others. We moved carefully. The custodian isn't just one person. He's calculated, trained, and ready for manipulation. Expect psychological traps, booby traps, everything they used on their victims. But we stopped them here, once and for all. Entering the White House. They approached under the cover of dawn. Mara's pulse thudded in her ears as Rowan disabled the perimeter cameras. The gates clicked open, silent against the morning fog. The mansion loomed ahead, pristine yet ominous. Windows reflected the dim light, hiding anything inside. Inside, the house smelled faintly of antiseptic and old wood. Hallways stretched endlessly, with ornate rugs and antique furniture that seemed untouched. But Mara knew better. Every room, every corner, could be a trap. Stay sharp, she whispered. There's no telling what they've prepared. Footsteps echoed softly as they moved deeper. Suddenly, a faint hum filled the air. A series of pre-recorded whispers, fragmented commands, echoes of past victims. The psychological manipulation techniques the custodian had perfected. Rowan stiffened. They've set up triggers. Audio, visual. It's meant to disorient us, make us doubt ourselves. Mara shook her head. Not this time. Not anymore. We know what to expect. Let's push forward. The archive custodian revealed. In the central hallway, the lights flickered. A figure stepped from the shadows, tall, lean, wearing a long coat. His face was obscured by a hood, but Mara recognized the posture, the deliberate calm, the same silhouette from the Blackridge archives. You've come, the custodian said, voice calm but resonant. I wondered how long it would take. Mara's eyes narrowed. Vincent Holbrook, or whatever name you hide behind. You've manipulated lives, controlled memories, and destroyed families. It ends here. The custodian chuckled softly. You think you understand control? Control is not just about force. It's about obedience through memory, through fear, through compliance. I don't just take lives, I shape them. Rowan stepped forward, weapon raised. Step away from the survivor's files. It's over. The custodian raised his hands mockingly. Over? My dear detectives, You are merely a page in a book that I have written for decades. But you are persistent. Admirable even. Mara's voice was firm. Persistence is stronger than fear. And we're here to end your control. Every subject, every survivor, every twisted plan. The psychological battlefield. The custodian activated a hidden console. Screens flickered to life along the walls, showing images of survivors, including Lila Tanner and others rescued during previous raids. Audio messages of commands and triggers filled the room. Rowan's eyes widened. They're still being manipulated even now. We need to act fast before these triggers force them to harm themselves or others. The custodian smiled calm. Observe. Even with the handlers gone, my system endures. The circle is eternal, and obedience is permanent. Mara stepped forward. Not permanent. Not if we break the patterns. She connected a portable device to the console, a digital countermeasure designed from Emily Shaw's notes. It emitted a specific frequency meant to disrupt the audio triggers, neutralizing the conditioned commands. The screens flickered, the hum dissipated, and for the first time, the survivors' faces on the monitors appeared calm, no longer under compulsion. The custodian's eyes narrowed. Clever. But cleverness alone cannot undo decades of work. Rowan pressed her advantage. It can if you've underestimated us. Your control ends today. The physical confrontation. The custodian lunged suddenly, attempting to physically overpower Mara. She dodged, narrowly avoiding a sharp object he swung. Rowan engaged him, forcing him toward a reinforced door. The fight was tense, combining physical skill with psychological manipulation. The custodian tried to exploit their fears and doubts, whispering commands as if he could bend reality. But Mara and Rowan remained focused, coordinating as they moved him into a corner of the mansion. Your network is finished, Mara said, pushing him against the wall. Your archives, your manipulation, your operatives, all of it is over. The custodian sneered. You think the circle dies with me? I am only a node in a system far greater than Mill Creek, greater than yourselves. And you are pieces in my design. Rowan aimed her weapon with calm precision. Then consider yourself removed from the equation. Breaking the system. Mara moved to the central console and began downloading all remaining files. Audio recordings, survivor logs, coded instructions, and financial records linking the circle's members regionally. This is it, she said, determination in her voice. Every document, every name, every link exposed. The circle won't have anywhere to hide. The custodian's face twisted in anger. You cannot comprehend the scale. Even if you destroy my files, the system continues. My protégés. Mara cut him off sharply. Your protégés will be exposed. Your influence ends today. Rowan restrained the custodian, securing him until backup arrived. We've already dismantled much of the network, she said. Every operative caught. Every conditioned subject rescued. Your plan is finished. Liberation and revelations. With the custodian in custody, authorities worked to free the remaining survivors from hidden locations. Many had been under conditioning for years, living as obedient, passive shells. Psychological teams were brought in to reverse conditioning, restore memories, and provide therapy. Lila Tanner reunited with her family, overwhelmed by tears. I thought I'd never remember, never be myself again, she whispered to Mara. Mara hugged her tightly. You're safe now. They won't control you anymore. Rowan coordinated with federal teams to expose every circle operative, tracing the network across multiple counties. Judges, business leaders, and law enforcement members complicit in the network were arrested or investigated. The full scope of the circle's influence was revealed in shocking detail to the public. The emotional aftermath. For Mara, the victory was bittersweet. Emily Shaw's death remained a haunting shadow. The betrayal by Marcus Harlan and others had left scars that would never fully heal. But seeing survivors recover, seeing justice finally served, gave her a sense of closure. She visited the gravesite of her mother, who had risked her life to compile the evidence that eventually dismantled the network. Mara placed a hand on the cold stone. Your work wasn't in vain, she whispered. We finished it. We brought them all to light. The final chilling discovery. Even as the circle fell, Mara uncovered one final secret. In the custodian's personal effects, she found a sealed envelope marked. If you think this is the end, inside was a single photograph, a shadowed figure standing in the background of one of the archival recordings. Not the custodian, not a previously identified operative, but someone unknown, watching, overseeing, waiting. Mara's heart skipped. She showed Rowan. "Do you see this?" she asked, voice trembling slightly. Rowan leaned in, her brow furrowed. "Someone higher up, someone we didn't know existed. The circle may be dismantled, but not completely. There are still layers, hidden and unseen." Mara's eyes hardened, the weight of years of investigation settling over her. "Then we stay vigilant, because wherever they are, they're still out there, and we will find them, no matter how long it takes." Closure and determination. The town of Mill Creek slowly began to recover. Survivors reintegrated into society. Families reunited. The media covered the revelations, exposing the full scope of the Circle's regional operations. Mara and Rowan, exhausted but resolute, continued their work to ensure that the network's influence never returned. The psychological scars of the investigation, the betrayals, the deaths, they lingered. But Mara knew one truth above all: courage, persistence, and relentless pursuit of justice could dismantle even the most insidious of networks. And as she looked out over the quiet streets of Mill Creek, she understood that the battle against darkness was never truly over. But for the first time in years, the circle was broken. The shadows had been brought into the light, and for now the survivors were free.